Live from the divided states of America, sitting atop the transmission tower of truth, taking down hypocrisy one lie at a time. In the ladies' corner, my trolls call me Moscow Mary, but I'm your pierogi princess, journalist extraordinaire, American Farron Franzak.
And in the left corner, I'm your indefatigable, your ever-vigilant, your burning ember in the darkness, your political analyst, Jamaral Thomas.
Which means you're listening to Fault Lines with Franzak and Thomas.
What's happening, Franzak?
Oh, I'm just searching in on my pet cube, watching my dog just have a complete conniption fit because I'm gone.
We used to have that also. Pitsu used to lose it, like full-blown lose it for about 5 minutes, and then after he was like, here. And then what he would do is like, if there was another dog nearby, he used to do that in public. So it made it look as if it's like, you're acting like somebody's beating you. Nobody's beating you when you're trying to get away from us. He would lose it at times, and it would be like another dog walking by. He was like, he would flip out. And of course, it's so embarrassing.
Now, well, my dog is dramatic in the opposite sense. It's just like, you're leaving me and you're never coming back. And it's like, dude, I'm gone for like 3 hours. Now, folks,
Now,
you
how
can
old
tell
is your
me
dog?
he's going to be 6 in January.
So he's used to you going and coming back.
He's
and
used to me
everything else.
leaving and coming back, but here's the one problem is that I've had him since he was a month old. We had to go through the whole service dog training because he sits with kids in the hospital. And so when you do that training, you have to bring them everywhere. So he's always used to going everywhere with me.
Ah, there
and
it
I'm
is.
one of the people that has the real card that it's a service dog. None of y'all fakers out there. It's my therapy pet. You know what? If your dog is sitting next to you in the chair at a restaurant or your dog starts barking at other people, it's not a therapy dog or a service dog. Because trust me, you fail in those tests. Those tests are really hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, besides the point. So that's why when I leave, he gets really bad separation anxiety because he knows everywhere he goes, it's with me. And I have tried CBD oil. I have tried the calming treats. I have tried Doggy Xanax.
Benny.
Doggy Xanax is like throwing darts at a tank.
Benny.
Yeah, it's nuh-uh.
Benny is what you use.
I
Benadryl.
can't drug him every day.
Oh, Benadryl.
I even have a bark collar. He has a bark collar on right now too. Doesn't matter.
I'll tell you what we used to do for Pitsu and Apollo. Apollo is basically a puppy, high energy and everything else. And pit bulls have a tendency to have allergy issues, like skin and everything else. So, Benny, every so often, Benny will come into play. Okay, maybe you need a half of Benny to calm yourself down a little bit. I'm not advocating drugging your dog. I'm just saying, every so often, Benny,
My dog
Benny.
will then be drunk for the rest of his life. If that's what you're advocating, because again,
Again, I am not advocating drugging your dog. I want to state that
the
strongly.
thing is, he's great on planes, he's great in cars, he's great everywhere. It's just that when I am gone for that tiny bit of time. So now what I've been doing is when I get in the car with Jamaral in the morning, I literally have my pet cube on with the mic where he just hears me and Jamaral talking. And then he like calms down.
Yeah, he does.
And it's just like, I just want to make sure you get to work. Whatever.
Yeah, he weirdly calms down. He weirdly comes out.
It's weird.
It's like she's just screaming out. And I'm like, oh, not bad.
Yeah.
Give it a bad. And it's like, okay, yeah. But hearing the voice seems to chill him out. It does.
It's weird. Well, we've got a great hour for you folks.
Oh, yeah.
We have Gerald Oliver, who is a journalist, author, blogger, and editor at Atlantico. He's in France. Big elections there right now. Emmanuel Macron could get his croissant overturned. We don't know. So we're going to be talking to him about that, as well as kind of everything with Zelensky and slamming Merkel and Zarkovsky for denying Ukraine NATO membership. A lot of cool stuff on that. But for now, let's get to some headlines here. In your COVID news, Republican and Democratic negotiators forged a deal on Monday that will direct $10 billion to pay for vaccines, therapeutics, and domestic COVID health response tools, Senator Mitt Romney said in a statement. Quote, we've reached an agreement on a deal to provide $10 billion in funding for urgent COVID needs by repurposing unspent COVID funds primarily from the American Rescue Plan, Romney said on Twitter. The bill won't cost the American people a single additional dollar. This agreement represents only about half of the $22.5 billion President Joe Biden initially requested and is lower than a $15 billion version hammered out by Democratic and Republican leaders negotiated last month. The Chinese authorities announced Tuesday morning that the People's Republic witnessed a significant spike in COVID cases after the country imposed a lockdown in the large city of Shanghai. According to Beijing, the country saw 16,412 new daily coronavirus cases this week, the most since the pandemic began. In your national news, the jury selection process begins for the worst mass shooting in U.S. history, the AP reported Monday. The report says more than 120 of the first 160 prospective jurors who took part in the selection process for the trial of Nicholas Cruz, the person behind the mass shooting at Parkland Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, were dismissed from the Judge Elizabeth Schurer's courtroom. The primary reason cited for their dismissal was due to their inability to serve on the jury from the months of June through September. The jury will be determined whether or not Cruz will get life in prison or a sentence of death for murdering 17 people at the high school. In other news, it looks like Donald Trump's endorsement of Sarah Palin for U.S. Congress has paid dividends for the former governor of Alaska. According to the odds makers at Betfair, Palin's original odds to win the election were 7-1. However, since Trump's endorsement, the former governor's odds have improved 4-1. Trump's endorsement made headlines Sunday as the former president raved about Palin and praised the candidate for her previous support. He said, "Sarah shocked many when she endorsed me very early in 2016, and we won bigly. Now, it's my turn." Trump said in an April 3rd statement, quote, "Sarah Palin is tough and smart and will never back down, and I am proud to give her my complete and total endorsement and encourage all Republicans to unite behind this wonderful person. She's so wonderful, and her campaign to put America first." Sacramento police confirmed Monday that authorities made their first arrest in connection to the weekend shooting that left 6 dead and a dozen others injured. Police Chief Kathy Lester revealed that the authorities took into custody 26-year-old Dondre Martin in connection to the Sunday shooting and charged him with assault with a firearm, as well as being a prohibited person in possession of a firearm. Martin was not arrested for homicide. In your international news, Kim Yo-jong, the Deputy Department Director of the Publicity and Information Department of the Workers' Party of Korea, said Monday that if South Korea followed through on recent threats of a preemptive strike against North Korea, Pyongyang would reply with nuclear weapons. Quote, "In case South Korea opts for military confrontation with us, our nuclear combat force will inevitably have to carry out its duty," Kim said in remarks carried by Korean Civil News Agency. 2 referendums may be held in South Ossetia, first on joining Russia, and only after that, a referendum on reunification with Russia's North Ossetia may be held, the republic's president, Anatoly Bibilov, told Sputnik. According to Bibilov, consultations with Moscow are currently underway, and the referendum may take place after April 10th. He noted, however, that direct entry into Russia and the simultaneous unification of Ossetia will not happen because, quote, "this is not allowed by law." The United Kingdom's refusal to hold a UN Security Council meeting requested by Russia on allegations of atrocities in the Ukrainian town of Bucha is unprecedented in UN history, Russian ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, said Monday. "This thing that happened, this is something that is unbelievable and unprecedented in the history of the United Nations," Nebenzia said at a press conference on the situation. Holding a meeting would not benefit Western delegations and the anti-Russian narrative that they promote, Nebenzia added. Russia has now requested a Security Council meeting on April 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss the Bucha allegations. In your tech news, Truth Social Chief Technology Officer Josh Adams and Billy Boozer, head of the product development, have resigned from their respective roles amid the venture's fumbled rollout and uncertain future, according to an exclusive report from Reuters. Citing 8 anonymous individuals, quote, with knowledge of Truth Social's activities, the report detailed that Boozer and Adams, described by one individual as the brains behind the app's technology, initially embraced the anti-cancel culture and free speech mission laid out by higher-ups. Another little piece of tech news yesterday, as we know, Elon Musk bought 9.2% Twitter shares late last night. He put out a tweet saying, "Would you like to have an edit button?" So we're going to see how that goes, but big shakeup over at Twitter sphere. In your business news, Hungarian energy company MVM is discussing with Russian energy giant Gazprom The issue of making gas payments in the Russian currency, Russian ambassador to Hungary, Yevgeny Stanislavov, said in an interview with Sputnik. State energy company MVM, which signed a long-term contract with Gazprom Export, is discussing these issues on making these payments in rubles, he said. Oil prices jumped as much as 4%, returning U.S. crude to above $100 per barrel as more Western sanctions planned for Russia, along with news of a hike in Saudi selling prices, helped the market rebound from last week's worst sell-off in 2 years. Your crazy story of the day. Police in Britain were dealing with a tasty traffic obstruction Monday when a truck lost its load of cookies in a roadway. Police in the Erewash district of Derbyshire, England, said a truck carrying a large load of McVitie's biscuits lost the snack foods in the middle of travel. Police tweeting out, "Please bear with us this evening while we try and digest this issue. A lorry load of McVitie's finest have decided to abandon ship, causing a slight obstruction." Delays were reported in both directions while authorities worked to clear the road. There were no reports of injuries from the spilled biscuits. Your holidays today, National Deep Dish Pizza Day. Folks, in Chicago, there's only one pizza, and it's Lou Malnati's. Don't let anybody tell you different. First Contact Day, celebrating all weirdos who love Star Trek, like this one over here. National Caramel or Caramel Day. Potato, potato. National Flash Drive Day and Read a Roadmap Day. So put your Google Maps aside and read a roadmap. And then today in history, back in 1994, it was Kurt Cobain's death. 1951, the Rosenbergs were sentenced to death for spying for Russia. 1955, Winston Churchill retired as prime minister. And in 1984, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar broke an NBA all-time scoring record. Those are your headlines for Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. Woohoo! Were you big? Did you watch the big game last night?
What game?
Are you serious?
Yep. There was a game that took place last night. I told you I rarely watch national regular
NCAA
television.
championship game?
Oh, yeah. I didn't even know it existed. Like, I rarely watch regular television. Usually it's something very specific. Either it's something I'm trying to find.
I watched it on NCAA.com.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even know it existed. I'm not a huge sports person, short of like me sitting there and just kind of playing.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm not a huge sports person. So how did it go
a
up?
game last night?
Yeah.
Yes, there was, Jamaro. There was quite a big game.
So what happened in the game?
But I like Green Fane. Nobody cares about the NCAA. I was just saying if you watch the game, just because, it was two big rivalry schools, Kansas and University of North Carolina. It was big if you like the Chicago Bulls like me. It was Michael Jordan's school versus Kirk Heinrich's school.
Is that why they had Michael Jordan trending on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay.
Because he went to University of North Carolina.
Right.
It wasn't because he said
so.
a comment on Ukraine or he died.
Yeah, I saw his name coming up and I was like, okay, why is Michael Jordan trending? Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. So who won?
Kansas won by a very short margin, but it was a great game. I only watched like the last 5 minutes because I was knee deep in the news looking at all of these different clips.
Yeah.
Scourging around the internet, which actually I wanted to get to one. I wanted to talk. We talked about. Let's cue up that Biden on Putin sat. We talked about how Biden has called President Putin a war criminal, and I want you to take a listen to what he said yesterday. This guy, zero shame, doubling down, and also asking about these war crimes in Bucha. Take a listen.
One comment to make before I start the day. You may remember I got criticized for calling Putin a war criminal. Well, the truth of the matter is so what happened in Bucha. This warrants him, he is a war criminal. But we have to gather the information. We have to continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons they need to continue the fight. And we have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial. This guy is brutal. And what's happening in Bucha is outrageous. And everyone's seen it. Up to Allah. No, I think it is a war crime.
What are you going to do, sir? Are you going to do more sanctions on Russia?
I'm seeking more sanctions, yes. I'll have time to announce that to you.
Can you hold Putin accountable, though? You called him a war criminal.
He should be held accountable.
Without sanctions?
Well, no.
What else can you do?
No. Go the war crime tribunal. Yes, I'm going to continue to add sanctions. Thank you.
What kind of sanctions, Mr. President?
I'll let you know.
What other sanctions are you going to add? I mean, how much of a ditch are you going to continue to dig?
How about the fact that he said they're still investigating, but he's a war criminal?
Yeah, that's astonishing, right? There's been 0 investigations into this. And if you honestly believe there's going to be a legit, who is going to be this independent arbiter to do that investigation? I mean, think about it for the moment. Russia comes out and says, we want a UN Security Council meeting immediately. The UK is like, yeah, no. What do you mean, no?
Now, yesterday, it was interesting. Jackson Hinkle, shout out
one
to
last
my
thing.
baby love.
Let me add one last thing. U.S. Hague Invasion Act becomes law. Like, that's the astonishing part, right? He's like, he's a war criminal. And if you hear him, he says the Hague or the International Criminal Court. Well, the United States is not even a signatory. A U.S. President George Bush signed into law the American Servicemen Protection Act of 2002, which is intended to intimidate countries that ratify the treaty for the International Criminal Court. The law authorizes the use of military force to liberate any American or citizen of a U.S. allied country being held by the court, which is located in The Hague. Dubbed Hague Invasion Clause, has created a strong reaction of U.S. allies. This is a court that is supposed to look at criminal charges, meaning war crimes. The U.S. is attacking the criminal court for obvious reasons, right? Iraq, Afghanistan is a signatory to the court, or to the war crime stuff. And so they were looking into war crimes by the United States, in which case this was meant to protect our service members from war crimes. So the idea that I was about to call him George Bush. He is incompetent, just like George Bush. The idea that Biden is like, yeah, we need to get the ICC involved. It's just shocking, that's all. I can't even use the term shocking anymore. It's astonishing that nobody asked him that.
You can't even use the word astonishing.
Yeah.
You're going to have to think of 2 new words.
I got to find new words.
Yeah. But what I was going to say, though, is Jackson Hinkle, shout out to my baby love. I love that kid. He had on Colonel McGregor yesterday, and he asked him, who do you think this is? Do you think it's Russia? Do you think it's Ukraine? And he said, right now what they're seeing is these people have these white scarves on their arms, which means neutrality, that they're neither with Russia or Ukraine, like they don't want to get involved. And it has been widely known in the country that the Azov Battalion has been targeting people that wear these white scarves. However, the one thing that McGregor did say that I was like, this is so true, because he even said, he's like, if I was in there with Trump right now, this is what we would be doing. He was like, the United States needs to bring these 2 countries together. And even was saying, like, if you bring in, and I've even said this before too, he goes, if you have the U.S. with Ukraine at the table, bring Russia. And if they want a counterpart, bring Belarus. You come to the table and you figure this out. He's like, the fact that Biden is not showing leadership on this, he's like, more people are going to die.
He's showing leadership.
No,
he's showing leadership. He's showing the fight to the last dead Ukrainian. I don't believe for a moment.
I don't consider that leadership. I consider that a war criminal.
From his standpoint and what he wants to accomplish and what the European leaders want to accomplish, yes, they're willing to put money, weapons, and everything else. They're not deviating or backing away from it. Biden has the capability, meaning at any point along this process.
You would think this guy that can't even tell the difference between a sneeze and a wet fart is literally is showing leadership. He is gone.
It depends on what you mean by leadership, right? If your objective is, yes, we're going to fight Russia to the last dead Ukrainian, we're going to bleed them white, then yeah, from the standpoint of leadership in regards to Europe, leading them to hell, yes, in that sense. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good leadership.
I don't even think he knows what's going on. I really don't think he knows what's going on. And you have Jen
What about the gang of idiots in Europe? I mean, like, the darkening economic picture from the standpoint of Europe is astonishing.
Well, here's why I don't think he knows what's going on. You have everybody jumping ship. You now have Kamala Harris's deputy chief of staff leaving. She's now has a staff of 12 leaving. And I think part of it is because of her. I think it's also they don't want to be tied up in this administration. Yeah. Jen Psaki, she's not even leaving after the whole Ukraine crisis is over because she doesn't want to have to, she can't eat the bull anymore. Yeah. I think that he as far as leading, he is basically a figurehead because all of these neocons are behind him, pulling the puppet strings. He is off the reservation.
Look, I think this is one of those things like you were talking to Tariq. This was something that Biden wanted for a long time. And so I am not shocked at all that these kind of neoconish ideas are being put out by Biden. And Europe, I mean, my thing is this. They should have known or had enough sense during the first war with George Bush that, hey, maybe you shouldn't follow the United States to hell in the way that you're willing to do. Those idiots, the gang of idiots in Europe, are basically decimating the economic output of their country. They're paying massive amounts for inflation, massive amounts of food, and that is based entirely on geopolitical policy. That is nothing else other than what they've decided to do. And so from the standpoint of leading, again, depends on what you mean by leading, right?
Well, and Left of Most just said the whole Biden being senile thing will be used to keep him from ever being prosecuted like Reagan and his sudden Alzheimer's after leaving office. That's a good point, too.
Well, the sad
We'll
part
see.
is, from the standpoint of media, they don't even recognize or acknowledge the U.S. culpability or Europe's culpability in creating this conflict in the first place. They don't even acknowledge, per se, that this never had to take place. That Zelensky is saying behind the scenes, oh, yeah, they told me I'll never be a part of NATO. Or that they were trying to get him to basically accept what he is now currently willing to accept. No, it's aggravating that this thing is taking place. But look, let's take a break.
Yeah,
You
so
guys
you
are
gotta get to your monologue.
Yeah, you guys are listening to Fault Lines. Thomas, Bronzak, back in a moment.
Fault Lines. Fault Lines.
And welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. I'm Farron Franzek alongside my co-host Jamarl Thomas. Jamarl, let's get to it. What is your fault?
My fault is getting into the dark, corners of Bucha. That is the topic that's on everybody's mouth. That is the thing that the West has basically ended up getting itself into a Twitter about. So I guess we have to deal with it directly. Before getting into the Bucha, let's just talk about context, where we are currently. The Ukraine has offered concessions. They've offered to limit military in the country itself. They've offered to limit or to not be a part of NATO. They've agreed to have a neutral status. They've agreed that foreign troops would not be based in Ukraine. And they've agreed to get Russian permission if there are going to be military exercises with foreign troops. So on one side, you have a group that is making concessions. I'm making that point to get across that people who are winning a conflict don't tend to make concessions. It tends to be the side that is losing it. So whatever the U.S. media is giving you as a point of view, that is the reality of events. In Mariupol, you have reports that Russia, or that 99%, or let's say 95% of the country, or that city, has basically been taken by the Russians. Some reports go higher. They are basically going after the Azov Battalion, which is basically this kind of centerpiece of that particular city. That seems to be on the brink of collapse at that point from the standpoint of Ukraine. That would be a magnificent loss or stinging defeat if such takes place. And again, we're watching that. There's been a repositioning of forces towards the Donbass, which again was one of the key objectives of this conflict in the first place. Now, the New York Times, let's get to Bucha. The New York Times comes out, and this is not just the New York Times. Basically, video came out from Ukraine. It's always from Ukraine's point of view. We are talking about the West. And it's basically showing people dead on the streets, some of them with their arms tied behind their back. I just read the New York Times. When images emerged over the weekend of bodies of dead civilians lying on the streets in Bucha, some with their hands bound, some with gunshot wounds to the head, Russian Ministry of Defense denied responsibility. In a Telegram post on Sunday, the ministry suggested the bodies had been recently placed on the streets after all Russian units had completely withdrawn from Bucha around March 30th. Now, we had Mark Sleboda on yesterday that basically gave the position and explained that from Russia's point of view, that they had already left, that the Ukrainian, let's say, police force comes in after them, and then all of a sudden you get these indications of bodies. They even show the video of the mayor basically not bringing this up, that you would think that this would be somewhat of a big issue if indeed these bodies were strewn that way. But whatever. At this point, we have no idea what's taking place. The New York Times goes and says, buried in the article, of course, the causes of death are unclear. Some of the bodies were beside what appears to be impact craters. Other were abandoned by cars. 3 of the bodies lay beside bicycles. Some have their hands bound behind their backs with a white cloth. The bodies were scattered all over more than a half a mile of Yablonsky Street. This is dark stuff. Now, the West has basically ran with this and saying Russia is entirely guilty. No, there's been no investigation. No, there's been no independent corroboration of the events that are taking place on the ground. And yes, they've basically taken the Ukrainian military point of view all the way through, and all of the countries at this point of the West are ready to put on sanctions for something that they don't even have a clear understanding of. Now, we have been more right on this show about one topic after the next. We made the point about the conflict and the majority of the conflict being in the East. That is correct. That's also backed up by Western sources at this point. The objective was to destroy or smash the military. Again, that is something that is being acknowledged by various news sources. I mean, you can even go to Newsweek at the point. We even made the point that the objective to secure Donbass, Kiev, was never the point from the standpoint of a military campaign. We've even given you a contextual understanding of how this conflict took place why this conflict is taking place. And that is something that the Western media has not done. My point in saying that is, when we are giving you an appraisal of this, we're being honest. We have no idea what is true. My mom called me last night and she was asking me, what is going on? What is going on?
Shout
and
out
I gave
to
her,
Diane.
I gave her a contextual understanding of the events on the ground. I told her I have no idea what was taking place. What we do know is that there were Russian soldiers that were being tortured, shot in the leg, in some cases, a bag over their heads. I mean, very dark, dark stuff that I sat there and basically watched. Now, if other Russian troops saw that, does that inspire them to act and respond in kind? I don't know. From the standpoint of the Ukrainian military, it is existential for them. They are losing this conflict, and this major battle is about to take place in Donbass. If you have a bunch of neo-Nazis that look at Russians as Übermenschen, subhuman beings, and you have this situation where you realize and acknowledge that you are losing a conflict, so much so you're running out of weapons, you're running out of gas, fuel, et cetera, what do you do to try to get larger forces involved into the conflict? And how far would you go to do it? These are not typical soldiers. These guys are fascists, neo-Nazis in the real and truest sense of the word. You can look at the insignia, you can look at the flag-burning ceremonies, you can look at the things they're doing. It is clear at this point. C-14, Azov Battalion, Right Sector, etc. And these guys have been incorporated into the Ukrainian military. Don't take my word for it. Take Zelensky's. Let's play the clip of Zelensky. Let's skip the clip of Biden. I know I had that one first, but let's go to Zelensky. This is Zelensky on Bret Baier, and he is basically talking about war crimes committed by the Ukrainian military. This got scrubbed. It's not going to get scrubbed here. Let's play the clip.
Clear something up for us. And this is these reports about the Azov Battalion that is said to be Nazi-affiliated organization operating as a militia in your country, said to be committing their own atrocities. What should Americans know about that unit, about those reports?
So Azov was one of those many battalions. They are what they are. They were defending our country. And later I want to explain to you. Everything from all the components of those volunteer battalions later were incorporated into the military of Ukraine.
Let's stop right there. Hey, what about the war crimes and the horrible torture that was taking place with your troops and the Russians? Hey, they are what they are. They've been incorporated into the Ukrainian military. Again, something else that we've already told you. So basically, the neo-Nazis that have been incorporated into the Ukrainian military, will these fascists who look at the ethnic Russian Ukrainians in a particular way? I mean, there have been talks about concentration camp-like items and all. We don't report that in the West. We do report everything that takes place from the standpoint of the Ukrainian point of view. What I'm getting at here is it is unclear what is taking place on the ground. I'll give you another one. Part of my reason for the skepticism on this has to do with stuff that has already taken place, especially in regards to Syria. This is Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh was the guy that basically broke the My Lai massacre. I'll just read it. This was the London Review. They wouldn't even print it in the United States. In months before the attack, this is talking about Syria. Meaning, if you remember, there was this Assad gasses people stuff. Now, you had people from the OPCW that were on the ground that basically made a point of saying, hey, this looks staged. And also, why would Assad do this when they've already taken 90-something% of their territory with the help of the Russian and Iranians? Meaning they've stabilized it. What the U.S. would say is Assad is a bad guy. That's the only reason he did it. And without any evidence, attacked the country. Now, when Obama was in office, and this issue came up and Obama used that red line statement, Obama, if you remember, at one point, chemical weapon strike. Hey, how convenient is that? The opposition and the people who we were basically backing, these kind of free democratic terrorists that we were basically backing, that we were calling them Democrats in some kind of weird way. Well, whose interest was it to do that? Meaning, if Assad has been clinging to power like grim death, and he knows that the provocation that is necessary is a chemical weapon strike, why would he do that? By the same token, if you're the opposition that is basically trying to take the government down, are you incentivized to basically, let's say, do it yourself or to hoax it? Seymour Hersh, in 3 months before the attack, American intelligence agencies produced a series of highly classified reports culminating in a formal operation order, a planning document that precedes a ground invasion citing evidence of al-Nusra's Front, a jihadi group affiliated with al-Qaeda, had mastered the mechanics of creating sarin and was capable of manufacturing it in quantity. When the attack occurred, al-Nusra should have been a suspect, but the administration cherry-picked intelligence to justify a strike against Assad. You have the OPCW stuff where the Western media completely ignored. You had this notion of what seems to be Americans that were basically trying to intimidate the various members of the OPCW. These people even came out to contest the report that was basically created to back up the Western position. So if you have a situation where there are people on the ground that are about to lose a war, and in the context of losing that war requires more assistance from the West wants more sanctions, and they're looking for a reason and justification to do so, would you either hoax or commit a war crime in order to provoke it? I guess my question is, I don't know. And that's the problem with all of this, right? Sitting on the moon, looking at events, what's more likely to be true in its very specific situation? You need an investigation. And the unfortunate aspect of this is, who's going to do it? Who is going to be the independent arbiter that goes to the ground and makes a choice? Knowing the way that the Western media has reported on this war and this conflict, it is not something that you can basically accept. And of course, from the Russian position, the West will never accept what they give. What's true? And unfortunately, I have no idea. Baron, this is a dark, dark story. And like I said, I am very skeptical of the Western position coming out of this. I am very skeptical of what Ukraine is saying in this. By the same token, I don't particularly know. And even the New York Times, buried in the article, makes the point that they don't know either. So, look, we need an investigation, right? And unfortunately.
But I think the other thing that needs to be said, though, too, you know, I think Russia needs to get a little bit smarter on a lot of this. You know, Russia needs to, they basically implicated themselves by not having any proof or anything like this. Ukraine is winning the social media game.
Absolutely.
And I think that Russia needs to start, you know, upping the ante as far as their social media game or just their public PR. I know, for example, that, you know, for at least from what I've experienced, that PR is kind of not something that's usually put at the forefront and stuff like this when it comes to the Russian side. And I think that they need to start getting a little bit more.
Now, how would they do that in the United States? And because that's the catch, right? It's like, how do you, when you have a media narrative where Twitter doesn't allow it, Facebook doesn't allow the position, the U.S. media doesn't allow the position.
And that's where I think, and that's a good point when it comes to the West. And maybe that, you might be absolutely right, is that they're being censored. So their whole standpoint is completely out of the norm. However, I will say, I think with this whole thing with Bucha, it does need to be investigated. Russia has come out saying that they denounce this, what have you. Both sides are saying that they haven't done it.
Right.
And no matter what side investigates, it's going to come out in their favor. So I think you're basically at a Mexican standoff. But the one thing I will say, though, is I think that Russia needs to start documenting their stuff a hell of a lot more, just so they don't run into stuff like this, you know? And I think that I'm
sorry, every incentive in the world leads the Ukrainian military to try to create some provocation to get the West involved. Meaning, if you're losing, how do you win it? And from their standpoint, yes, they want more weapons. Yes, they want more tanks.
Let's create a false flag.
Exactly.
Like there's the whole idea of a chemical attack that they said that possibly happened in the Donbass region.
Exactly.
They're saying there's no way it could have been the Russians because of the way the downhill was going and how it was going to be going into the people of Donbass. And they're like, it's most likely Ukrainian. We don't know. It's a war.
Yeah.
You know, but again, right now, Ukraine is leading the propaganda war because, again, it hasn't been censored.
Yes.
And mind you, while RT and everything else has been censored here, Ukraine over there, it's the same thing. Zelensky is censoring people. The U.S. is censoring people.
Eliminating political parties.
You know, stuff. So I think it's just, you know, with all these people, when they immediately come out and they have this visceral reaction of, it was Russia, I think that's very dangerous.
Yes.
Because, again, you saw, remember Hanoi Jane Fonda, when she went down to Vietnam and the whole Hanoi Jane and how horrible she was and how she was anti-American. And then there was the whole Pentagon Papers that came out and all the stuff exposing the Agent Orange and all this other stuff that we were doing to these poor people over in Vietnam. Nobody is perfect here, folks. Nobody. And I think people need to stop acting like they're perfect. Like we said in the car, hypocrisy in all of this. The hypocrisy is so thick.
Yeah, so thick.
And again, for the United States to act like, we need to take Russia for war crimes. Okay, then let's go back to Iraq, Afghanistan. That would have then opened the whole can of worms on Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. And that's the thing, is that they don't want, pay no attention of what we've done. And that's the whole whataboutism. You can do something crappy and I can call you out for it. However, if you call me out for doing something crappy, that's whataboutism. And that's the part that just gets so annoying in all this. And again, with the war, it's going to be messy. First casualty of war is truth. You hear everybody, oh yeah, the first casualty of war is truth. No, it really is. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, all of it. And again, you can't have these visceral reactions until things are done, investigated. And then at the same time, you got to investigate the investigators too.
Exactly. And,
you know?
Because like I said, some of this stuff doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, all I'm saying is the West has reported in a very specific way. And I would say before you jump to conclusions where all of these guys are basically Russia did it. Okay, does the Ukrainian military and some of these neo-Nazis, have an incentive to stage something like this? The answer is yes. Just be honest. Does it mean they did it? No. Does it mean they have an incentive? Yes.
At this point, nobody on any side is equal.
Exactly.
But let's take a quick break because we want to get to our guest, a new guest, Gerald Oliver. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes. Rumble.com/faultlines. Rumble.com/faultlines. 347 in the chat. Share with your mama, your baby, your auntie, your uncle, your cat, your dog, your hamster, everybody. We'll see you back in 2.
Fault Lines. Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Farron Franzak, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys live in the D.C. area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also kicking around in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Farron and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. And I'm going to go straight to our guest because we're running a little bit late. We have Gerald Oliver. He is a journalist, author, blogger, and editor at The Atlantico. Gerald, thank you for joining us. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning.
I'm doing great. It's afternoon here, though, but thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you joining us. So let's do this. Let's jump into France, since that's where you are. Macron is calling for sanctions, basically Europe in general. And he is basically saying he wants a ban on Russian oil and coal after the quote-unquote killings or whatever basically took place in Bucha. Well, this seems, for one, it's conspicuously not gas. There's that point. And also, it belies the fact that Europe is having this severe economic crisis at this point that's only getting worse, where these guys seem to be doubling down on it in spite of the damage, meaning, 10% inflation in many of the European countries, not to mention rises, increases, gas costs, food costs, etc. What is your take on this? I mean, like, what is going on in France? And what is the perspective of Europe, especially in regards to the economic situation in context of the sanctions that these guys are continuously trying to push?
Well, unfortunately, what you have to look at and understand that the war itself was a game changer. And it was a major disappointment beside the tragedy, besides the fighting, because it told European leaders, Macron among others, but especially German leaders, it told them that they'd been wrong for the past 20 years. What you have to understand, and even 30 years, what you have to understand from a European perspective is that from the end of the Cold War on, the purpose of anybody's policy has always been to include Russia into a new European hold, economically speaking, and even strategically speaking. And the German bet with Russian gas was not just a way for Germany to get cheap energy, reliable energy, and allow it to go into its own energy transition, as we call it here. It was a way to prove that Russia was no longer a hostile power from a European perspective, and that you could deal with Russia on an equal partnership kind of basis. And the Germans, especially, much more than the French. The French have nuclear energy that covers 70% of its energy needs when it comes to electricity and is far less dependent on Russian gas or Russian oil than other European countries such as Germany. So the idea behind Nord Stream 2 specifically was to show that A, you could rely on Russia for energy supply, B, you could deal with Russia as a normal country, no longer from a mostly hostile perspective. And one is to look and consider that Russia's move against Ukraine was a major strategic mistake. Behind and beyond the human tragedy, Russia lost all trust, the trust that other European nations had tried to build over time. And this trust will be the hardest thing to rebuild, whatever the outcome of the current conflict is.
But Gerald,
when Macron is calling for new sanctions against Russia, he is just taking stock of whatever has happened after and since February 24th. And unfortunately, it's not in Russia's favor, whatever the economic cost is. And let's be honest, the economic cost here is nothing as compared to the human cost actually happening right now in Ukraine.
I get that. I do get that. But doesn't it go both ways? Meaning this notion that there's a break in trust from the standpoint of Europe to Russia. Hey, that goes both ways. I mean, look, you can deal with Russia as a normal country as long as you acknowledge their security concerns. And the truth is, it was completely ignored. Not just completely ignored, even now, when they were basically saying, look, you guys are surrounding us. That's an issue.
I'm not sure. You have to look at it again. I'm sorry to cut in so quickly. But I understand your point, and it's been put forward, and I think that point should be explored in depth, because on the one hand, people have been very quick to dismiss Russia's legitimate security concerns. Yes, I agree on that. But if you look at NATO's action, and not just NATO, but European Union's actions ever since the end of the Cold War, you could see that there were many forums trying to include Russia into a strategic dialogue and partnership. There was the Partnership for Peace. There was such a thing called as the Russian NATO Council. There were regular meetings. There are even instances across the world where NATO and Russia are cooperating, and that's against drug trafficking and terrorism. And now, so the claim that NATO was trying to encircle Russia does not really hold. You only have to look at the map. Russia has about not even 1,000 miles, less than 1,000 miles of border with NATO country. Total border of Russia is over 16,000 miles. So you have like 1/10 of your border are with hostile countries in a way. That's not encirclement.
Let me ask you this: Would the United States tolerate, let's say, Russia throwing over the government of Mexico in order to put in troops, weapons, etc.? Would the U.S. tolerate that?
No, bro.
Then why should Russia tolerate it? That's kind of the point that I'm getting at. Meaning, whether it's encircled.
Okay, when was the last time that the U.S. Invaded Mexico?
Oh, I didn't say the U.S. invaded Mexico.
The Spanish-American
War?
When
When did they last make a deal to take over its government, not just economically through influence, but the context of the Cold War is something that you cannot ignore. And like you keep asking and wanting people to look at it both ways. And yes, you do have to look at it both ways. And what happened is there was at a time something called the Warsaw Pact, and that military alliance was dissolved when the Soviet Union imploded. And those former countries that were former Soviet Republic or Soviet satellite became independent countries. And an independent country should be free to lead its own independent foreign policy, which includes its joining any alliance it so wishes. And that is not a declaration of war against its neighbor. And it may be seen, and as it was, a way to protect itself from its neighbor. And here, the real question now, and I invite you to think of that one very, very closely, because I think the heart of our problem is right there, is what was Russia's, and I will say Vladimir Putin's as much as they will say Russia, what was Vladimir Putin's real intention when he attacked Ukraine? And I think this point is undebatable, that the aggressor here, the current aggressor, is Vladimir Putin's Russia. Everybody interpreted it as a way to prevent a NATO expansion. I don't think it's the case. I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. And most Europeans are beginning to look at this issue from a different perspective. The real issue was to bring Ukraine back under the Russian mold. And the idea is that there is such a thing as a Russian people that was once united and which is now present in many countries, including Moldova, including Georgia, including the Baltic states. And in all those states now are no longer part of Russia. They are independent state. And the idea, Putin's real idea, is to rebuild the Russian Empire of the late 19th century. That means Ukraine is only one step. And Europe is looking at it from that point of view. NATO is only a pretext here. It is not the actual reason behind the war. There is something else going on.
So, Gerald, what do you think was it that had, you said, Europeans are looking at this differently. We know yesterday these atrocities that happened in Bucha, they're being investigated. We don't know which side actually did it. One side says it's the other, and that's basically at a Mexican standoff as far as who's going to say they did it. But what was it that made Europeans now start looking at this differently, do you think? Was it Bucha?
No, it wasn't Bucha. No, it changed before. It was Vladimir Putin's deliberate decision to use military force to impose his will on Ukraine. That broke the game. You see, the understanding between Russia and Europe for those past 30 years has been that you could deal with Russia as a normal country, meaning a country that would not lead a war of choice for a simple, ambitious, or strategic reason. And the idea, actually, NATO and European countries were very much concerned with preserving and in some ways respecting Russia's former sphere of influence and security needs. If you recall the so-called, it wasn't so-called, but the summit, the now famous 2008 NATO summit in Bucharest, where a membership in NATO was promised. It was promised to Georgia, it was promised to Ukraine, but it was not given. And it was not even, the negotiations were not really implemented. It was simply a way to reassure both sides. On one side, NATO and Europe were telling Georgia and Ukraine, yes, you have, shall I say, a justification in eventually becoming NATO members. But we're not going to do it now because we don't want to do anything that might be interpreted as provocation from the Russian side. And that was a way actually to take into account, to take into stock Russia's security needs. The reality of 2008 is that negotiations should have begun right then to include Ukraine and Georgia. And they didn't. And they didn't as a way to keep Russia within, we shall say, talking level. And the idea had always been that we are not going to be the aggressor towards the other side. And that kind of unwritten agreement has been broken on February 24th when Russian forces invaded. And that was the reason for the wake-up call in Germany. And that was the reason for Macron all of a sudden no longer trying to negotiate a peace deal, but act towards punishing Russia for what it had done, going back dozens of years in terms of strategic thinking. The Bucha is a terrible, horrible, undescribable tragedy of war. but it's not the turning point. It's not the game changer. The game changer intervened earlier.
I want to pivot and ask you this, because what you're saying is very interesting, but there's also another side to this. So you have over the weekend, you had Viktor Orban, who was reelected as the president of Hungary, who has now said about paying for gas in Russian rubles, and has kind of not given his allegiance to Russia, but has said, hey, we're going to work with Russia. You have the same with Serbia. Now you have Marine Le Pen, who is a far-right presidential candidate in France, whose campaign, who, mind you, 2 days ago, she said, and I quote, that Putin could become an ally to France again. Well, that was 2 days ago. Now you have her campaign gaining traction, receiving 48.5% of voter intentions in an opinion poll regarding a potential runoff versus Emmanuel Macron, the highest score she's ever received. So my question is if Europeans are looking at this and saying, no, now Russia has gone too far, yet you're starting to see a movement of leaders where they're becoming a little bit more nationalistic and saying we need to get along with Russia because they're our neighbors. Where am I missing that with what Europeans, with what you're saying versus what a lot of these polls are saying?
No, you're absolutely right about the polls. You're absolutely right about the election and its meaning. There are two sides to the issue. And the other side is that nations of Europe are still nations, and there is a very strong nationalistic sentiment. And that sentiment is strong in Hungary. It has been strong in Hungary, and it has been showing for some years already. As you know, there's a presidential election in France this coming weekend. It will be the first round of two ballots. And yes, Marine Le Pen is the leading challenger to President Macron. And Éric Zemmour is another challenger from the right. And everybody will be looking at the scores of those three people. Everyone expects Macron to come ahead, but the strength of the opposition is something that people are definitely looking at. And it is true that in the past month, first Marine Le Pen and Éric Zemmour, who have both mentioned the fact that Russia is a contender that should be listened to and is not necessarily a hostile country, both saw their numbers in the polls go down initially. And then they've come back up in the past few days when people have paid more attention and realized that there were actually two narratives or two sides to look at this country. But where what I was saying earlier and what you're saying now come together is when you look at European countries as individual nations. And there is such a thing as a national sentiment. It is that same sentiment which is actually playing in Ukraine. And it is what Vladimir Putin totally overlooked. He thought that most Ukrainians would embrace Russians coming back in Kyiv and elsewhere. And it wasn't the case, because in the past 30 years, those nations have developed an independent thinking. They want to be allowed to think for themselves, whether they are Ukrainians or Hungarians or Lithuanians or Estonians or even French, as we will see it down Sunday. However, they also want to live in peace. They want to live in peace and they want to live in trust with their neighbors. So they neither want an American power that tells them, I'm going to put my army in your country so as to protect you because you have an aggressor next to you. And they don't want that potential aggressor to act aggressively. That's the whole problem. Most European nations would be very satisfied with living without NATO. Listen to me, living without NATO.
Well, and then that's to my next question, because you remember back in 2003 when the United States decided to invade Iraq, and France was very, very much against the invasion of Iraq. In fact, we renamed our French fries freedom fries because you guys went against us. I say us, meaning the United States. And you have now, and mind you, that was little Iraq. Okay, Iraq wasn't part of NATO. They weren't threatening anybody. France was against it. This is now Russia. We remember World War II. As they always say, France would be speaking German if it weren't for the United States or the Russians. They're one big joke. But the fact that this is now Russia, Is it because, why do you think is that France all of a sudden is siding with the United States when before, when the United States was behind the whole invasion of Iraq, it's widely known the United States is behind this whole thing in Ukraine. Is it because it's Russia and it's a nuclear power and it's not a little country like Iraq, and France doesn't give enough money as the United States does, and they're almost kind of a puppet to the United States? Is it because Emmanuel Macron doesn't have a spine, whereas Marie Le Pen, according to some of these polls, it seems like she does? Why is it that France all of a sudden decided to turn and side with the United States when just months ago, France and Germany were asking Zelensky, you need to come out and say that you're going to be neutral, and then all of a sudden taking this complete pivot?
Yeah, no, it's not because it's Russia. It is because it's Europe. And a war can always expand. You referred to Iraq. France's position regarding the war in Iraq was that their intelligence services were telling them that the U.S. intelligence services were lying about WMDs. And since no one else was willing to confront that lie, they went in openly and said, "No, we're not in together because we're not believing in that lie." Okay, I'm not sure.
Could this be another lie though too, with the United States behind it? I mean, the United States has lied once before. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate with you. Who says the United States isn't lying about this one?
I wouldn't put the U.S. in other words, Ukraine is not manipulated by the U.S. That's one thing that
Ukraine is not manipulated by the U.S.
in its own. It is held by the U.S. It has been trained militarily by Americans lately, especially since 2004. It has benefited from European and American assistance. But the idea that the U.S. is pulling the strings in Ukraine is a false idea. That's what I mean by nationalistic sentiment. In 30 years, a Ukraine nation has emerged. That's something that Vladimir Putin didn't take into account. Now, to go back to Macron's position, the position is now that Europe is much closer to the theater of war than the U.S. are.
Very true.
Okay, and the fact is, if you look further back, World War I started when someone was assassinated back in Sarajevo.
Gerald, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut in. We're
Gerald,
coming to a hard break.
We thank you so much because we like differing opinions. We bring everybody on the show, and we're going to get you back to, and we're going to give you more time because we ran over today. Gerald Oliveri is a journalist, author, blogger, editor at Atlantico. Gerald, love the conversation. Glad to have you. Again, we're getting you back. Folks, you're listening to Fault Lines, rebel.com/faultlines. Back in 2 minutes.
Fault Lines. Fault Lines.
Live from the divided states of America, precipitously perched at the edge of this resilient and exploited globe. Welcome to your context lens for the American perspective. In the left corner, I am your ever vigilant, your indefatigable political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And in the ladies' corner, my trolls call me Moscow Mary, but I am your ever polite pierogi princess, your journalist extraordinaire, Farron Franzak.
That means you're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Franzak. Great conversation with Gerald. Couldn't agree with him, couldn't disagree with him more.
But you know what?
I
I think having those conversations,
I love that conversation.
but like I said, I just don't like the no on camera.
Yeah, you disagree with me on that, and I disagree with you on it. I have zero issue in kind of shaking my head if I disagree with something that somebody's saying, and especially since it's full well going in line with the conversation that we're basically having. Meaning, it's not like I'm saying, "Yeah, dude, I entirely agree with you," and then it's in the background doing this. He clearly knows I disagree with him. If he's watching it, he's gonna see a person who's basically disagreeing with him, just like he's disagreeing with him in voice.
I'm only saying that in order to be open to conversations, and if somebody's saying that their point of view and you're sitting across the way going like this the whole time, I don't think that's being open to what they're saying. I don't think it's being respectful. Mama Thomas in the chat, you tell me. I'm gonna get your mother's opinion on this.
I mean, we just disagree. Flat fact, disagree. That's not you being right, that's not me being wrong. That's just, I disagree. He and I were having a conversation. I completely disagree with him in that conversation. I think it's somewhat ludicrous.
And you can totally disagree, but I think standing there shaking your head, I don't think that's a good thing.
Well, whether I'm doing that verbally or whether I'm doing that visually, Same thing. It's consistent. It's consistent. And by the way, that's not indicative of me not being close to what he's saying. Him and I are literally having a conversation about what he's saying. So, but this disagreement is what it is. People have points of view, right?
The chat's kind of 50-50.
Yeah. So,
It is being honest, but again, I'm just saying.
you're a different person.
Huh?
You're a different person. Let's just go with that. You're a different person. We have different points of view. I don't have an issue with it. You do. Different people. I would imagine there are going to be things where I'm going to be.
You.
Huh?
The chat's firing back at you.
They can fire back at me all they want. They can fire back at me all they want. But let's do this. Let's get into the headlines in the news. In COVID news, Republican and Democrat negotiators forged a deal on Monday that would direct $10 billion to pay for vaccines, therapeutics, and domestic COVID health response tools. Senator Mitt Romney says the bill won't cost the American people a single additional dollar. This agreement represents only half of the $22.5 billion President Joe Biden initially requested and is lower than the $15 billion version hammered out last month. Chinese authorities say the People's Republic witnessed a significant spike in COVID cases after the country imposed a lockdown in the large city of Shanghai. Beijing reports that the country saw 16,412 new daily coronavirus cases this week, the most since the pandemic began. Oh, God. I hope that's not restarted.
What happened? What happened?
I just hope that's not restarted. The COVID stuff.
I was like, did I mess something up? In
No.
headlines?
By
By the way, that the chat is actually loving this. They're like, this is now actually fault lines. This is fault lines. But you know what I will say? We do respect each other.
I would
We
rather
do.
not have a fault line on stuff that is specific to us. I would rather have that stuff on topics, but is what it is.
No, but you know what? Here's the thing. I respect you doing it. Like, if you want to sit there and shake your head, that's totally fine.
Doesn't seem my way.
You know what? Maybe, and here's my thing. Maybe it's because I come from a TV background where, oh shoot, sorry, not used to the mic in my face. I'm usually mic'd up. It's one of those things where I've been in interviews and there have been times where I've really had to watch my face because I've even had guests say, what was the face that she was making at me? What was that? and that's where I immediately, and even my producer Eddie will tell you, like, guests have even said, like, why was she making a face at me or whatever? And I don't even see the faces that I'm making, but like, I'll hear something and I'm like, that makes no flipping sense. And I've had to learn to like completely neutralize my face in the sense that the guests don't get angry so that it looks like I'm mocking them or, you know, that I think they're stupid and it shows up on my face because I'm a very animated person, if you couldn't tell. So that's why when I see it with you, I'm like, this is against my training. You know, what is it? Portal Bridge. Portal Bridge.
Right, Portal Bridge. Portal Bridge.
So I think it's healthy. Maybe Jamara will make me a little more loosey-goosey.
For me, it's radio, right? And oftentimes when we're having these
True.
debates or conversations, if I disagree, I disagree, right? It's not like I'm lying to the person. Everything just kind of falls in line with how I feel about it. It's like, oh, dude, I so disagree with this.
I do want to
Don't get me
master
wrong.
the Tucker Carlson's where it's like the pursed lips, like.
Yeah, like I think that's worse.
And that's what I'm
worse.
saying though, is I had to learn to completely neutralize my face when people respond. And if they said something funny, you know, I would laugh or what have you. But TV, it's so different, you know? And that's where, like I said, I see it and it's like, Portal Bridge.
No, I mean, I am not saying anything bad to the guy. There's nothing.
And I'm not saying that you're a bad person for doing it.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just,
nothing in the
I'm not
conversation.
used to it.
I'm not saying anything like sharp to him. It's just a conversation, right? And it's just a back and forth. I just disagree with this premise. But open to the conversation completely. And what did I say before we even got here? I was like, hopefully he's pro-NATO. I said that back there, right? Because I love those conversations. I mean, it's one thing to talk to somebody who agrees
We
with
were
you.
actually told he was not pro-NATO.
Oh, I didn't know one way or the other.
This was like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
Oh, no, when he said, I was like, yes, let's get into this conversation.
But I think
I'm
though,
excited by those
again though,
conversations.
and what I think was great about it though, before I cut in your headlines though, I think what was great about it is again asking him like, wait, where did the European divide start happening? Like, what was it? Was it Bucha? Because you are starting to see people flip, and then again, why is it that Marie Le Pen is doing so good then? And she even said we should be able to ally with Russia again, and then her scores go up.
It's just some of the things he's saying doesn't make sense. He's like, well, NATO basically, Europe brought Russia in by expanding NATO. And I could go back. It's like, then why on earth did they say NATO wouldn't expand 1 inch? Meaning, what he needs to explain to me is meaning that Europe fully understood going all the way back to the fall of the Soviet Union that expanding NATO was a no-no. All of them knew it. All of them got it. I could go to William Burns, net means net, same thing. you're expanding NATO to the border. This is a red line for Russia. If it is indeed true that Europe was bringing Russia into this, then why did they know that? Meaning they knew that all the way in the back.
I will say, like, Joe Palooka in the chat saying, format should be when guests that spew lies, you cut the connection. No.
No. Oh, God, no.
No.
You have
because
the conversation.
Then we
you
are
have the fight.
just like everybody else that rips the cord out of the wall and you can't say what you want. No.
No, you have the fight.
What you do is you just, you take the argument and you just run circles around them until they're finally so tired that they're like, crap, you're probably right.
My goal was to try to present the contradiction in what he was saying. That basically is like, does Russia have real security guarantees? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, okay, then what does that mean in regards to maintaining? And what does the United States do? I think he said that U.S. invade Mexico or something. You're missing the point. What I'm trying to show you is that when the shoe was on the other foot, we were willing to end the world in order to protect our security guarantees. Even your point about Iraq. Iraq was a national security issue. We went into Iraq. Does that mean United States is not a normal country because of doing so? What about the countries it's knocked over? Like, it's the level. There is a European perspective that is being enunciated that is just completely and flagrantly ignoring the other side in that conversation. That's all. But that's why I said I love that conversation. I would have never disconnected that guy. Him and I could have talked for an hour. I would have enjoyed it. But let's get back to headlines.
Yeah.
In national news, the jury selection process has begun for Nicholas Cruz, the person behind the mass shooting at Parkland's Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. More than 120 of the first 160 prospective jurors were dismissed due to their inability to serve from the months of June through September. The jury will determine if Cruz will get life in prison or sentence of death for murdering 17 people. Oh, put a pin in that one. Let's come back to that. Should he get death? It looks like Donald Trump's endorsement of Sarah Palin for U.S. Congress has paid dividends for the former governor of Alaska. According to the odds makers at Betfair, Palin's original odds to win the election were 7-1. However, since Trump endorsement of the former governor, her odds have improved from 4-1. Trump's endorsement made headlines on Sunday as the former president raved about Palin and praised the candidate for her previous support. Okay, so Trump does have powder in his gun. Sacramento police say authorities made the first arrest in connection to the weekend shooting that left 6 dead and a dozen others injured. 26-year-old Dandry Martin was taken into custody and charged him with assault with a firearm, as well as being a prohibited person in possession of a firearm. Martin was not arrested for homicide. In international news, Kim Yo-jong of the Workers' Party of Korea says if South Korea followed through with the recent threats of a preemptive strike against North Korea, Pyongyang will reply with nuclear weapons. Quote, in case of South Korea opts for military confrontation with us, our nuclear combat force would inevitably have to carry out its duty, unquote, Kim said in a statement. Is that Kim Jong-un or is that Kim Yo-jong? Who's
Kim Yo-jong.
Okay, Workers' Party. Okay. 2 referendums may be held in South Ossetia. First, on going Russia and joining Russia. The second, on reunification with Russia's North Ossetia. This told by the Republic's president, Anatoly Bibilov.
Anatoly Bibilov.
Thank you,
Bibilov.
Love. Okay, thank you, Bibilov. To Sputnik.
Bibilov.
Yeah, you even put in phonetics. Phonetics, believe it or not, was throwing me off a little. Throw me off. But no, I appreciate the phonetics. You're right, and it's perfectly right. Bibilov. Bibilov says consultations with Moscow were underway, and the referendum could happen after April 10th. Okay, that's going to be interesting because that's in Georgia, right? Yeah. All right, see what happens with that. The United Kingdom refusal to hold a UN Security Council meeting requested by Russia on allegations of atrocities in Ukrainian town of Bucha is unprecedented in United Nations history. Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, said. He added, holding a meeting would not benefit Western delegations and the anti-Russian narrative that they promote. Russia has now requested a Security Council meeting at 3 p.m. Eastern to discuss the Bucha allegations. Yeah, that is pretty big. And Europe, the UK needs to explain why they weren't willing to have that Security Council meeting. That's very strange. In tech news, Truth Social Chief Technology Officer Josh Adams and Billy Boozer, great last name, head of product development, have resigned from their respective roles amid Venture's fumbled rollout and uncertain future. A report detailed that Boozer and Adam, described by one individual as the brains behind the app's technology, initially embraced the anti-cancel culture and free speech mission laid out by their higher-ups. In Earth and Science news, an unknown creature thought to be an alien washed ashore on an Australian beach recently. According to the publication, the weirdly bloated creature whose head has been defleshed and the body looks more swollen, washed ashore last week and stirred up rumors on social media that the creature was indeed an alien. Russell Bicknell, a marine biologist, told Live Science that he thinks it's either a kangaroo or a wallaby. Interesting. In business news, Hungarian energy company MVM is discussing with Russian energy giant Gazprom the issue of making gas payments in Russian currency. Russian ambassador to Hungary, Yevgeny Stanzilov, said in an interview with Sputnik. Oil prices jumped as much as 4%, returning U.S. crude to above $100 a barrel as Western sanctions planned for Russia along the news hike of Saudi Arabia. Selling prices helped the market rebound from last week's worst sell-off in 2 years. Let's get to our crazy story for today. Police in Britain were dealing with a tasty traffic obstruction on Monday when a truck lost its load of cookies in a roadway. Police tweeted out, quote, "Please bear with us this evening while we try and digest this issue. A lorry load of McVite's finest have decided to abandon ship, causing a significant obstruction," unquote. No reports of injuries from spilled biscuits. In holiday news, we have National Deep Dish Pizza Day. That was Parents' Day. First Contact Day. Celebrate all things Star Trek. William Shatner is the greatest man alive. National Caramel Day. National Flash Drive Day. Read a Roadmap Day. All of those undermine the very fact of a Star Trek Day, but okay, let's keep going with that. In today's history, in 1994, we had Kurt Cobain's death. In 1951, Rosenberg sentenced to death for spying. That's an interesting one. In 1955, Winston Churchill retires as prime minister. And in 1984, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar breaks the NBA all-time scoring record. Those are your headlines. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas Franzak. That was a long list of headlines.
I know, right? They're getting longer and longer. But coming up after the break, I'm going to be talking about Elon Musk I think he's going to take over Twitter, folks.
You think so?
I think he's going to take over Twitter.
You think he's going to make it a free speech zone?
I think so. He was already asking about an edit button and all that overnight, so we'll see. But I do want to take your calls, too, to get your thoughts on it. 202-521-1320. 202-521-1320. Only on Elon Musk right now. At 9:45, we'll have it where you can talk about everything that you want. But if you got something to say on Elon Musk, give us a call. 202-521-1327. You're listening to Fault Lines.
1320.
1320. I lie. 521-1320. I am not Russian propaganda. 202-521-1320. Rumble.com/faultlines. We're back in 2 minutes.
Fault Lines. Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm joined with my lovely co-host, Farron Franzak, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. And it is that time, special time. I always appreciate this time frame. Farron Franzak, fault, alliteration. What is your fault for today, Farron?
This is Musktown. No, so I was looking at so you have Elon Musk, for those that have, not been listening to the show. In a filing disclosed Monday, the Tesla CEO bought a 9.2% stake in the company last month, making him Twitter's largest shareholder. After Musk purchased the shares, but before they were disclosed publicly, he tweeted a poll about Twitter and its commitment to free speech. Elon Musk tweeting, "Free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Do you believe Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle?" In a whopping poll answered by 2 million people, more than 2 million people.
Wait, let me guess.
Okay, go for it.
85% say they don't adhere to the principle.
That's a good opening guess, but it's a little bit lower than that.
Oh, 70%.
70-30.
Nailed it.
70-30, which is still a really big margin.
Yeah.
So you have this happening, and you can see, obviously, that there is growing sentiment. You had last year, the Twitter CEO, Jack Dorsey, stepped down. A new CEO was put in place where he basically said that we are the arbiters of what speech is to be put out there, which shocked many people. And many people saw Twitter possibly changing. And it started to change, especially in these last couple of months, especially when it came to social issues, in particular revolving around transgender issues. We saw, for example, a couple weeks back, we had the Babylon Bee that had its account removed because they announced Rachel Levine, who is a transgender in the Biden administration. They announced her as Man of the Year, which was, I think, a little bit, but at the same time, free speech, right? Well, Twitter called it hate speech. Thus came in the conversation about, okay, what is actually hate speech versus you hurt my feelings speech? So with that said, Tucker Carlson had a great opening monologue last night about this. And I don't want to, paraphrase or anything. I'm just going to let my man Tucker say it himself. Let's take a quick listen.
It's a good day in America, maybe a rare good day. We're going to celebrate no matter what. Here's the context for why it's good: censorship. Censorship is essentially the hallmark of neoliberalism. Have you noticed that? Our leaders seem to spend a lot more time trying to control what we say and think than trying to improve our country. And that means that anyone who utters the wrong words, even accidentally, gets fired or banned or ostracized or even charged with a crime. We've seen that too. We don't need to give you more examples of it. They are literally everywhere. If you live here, you're deeply familiar with it. But censorship now defines America's public conversation. We spend an awful lot of time complaining about that on this show. We probably don't spend enough time asking, what is this all about? Why are the authorities suddenly so intent on controlling our words? Why are they so afraid of free speech? This is a new thing, and the answer is pretty simple. It's an act of self-preservation. If voters were allowed to think for themselves, the entire system would teeter and possibly collapse. Sound like an overstatement? Okay. Consider the ideas that the people in power use to justify their power and their rule over you. Here are some of their slogans, not one of which you're allowed to disagree with. Here they go. America is a racist country. White supremacy is our biggest threat. January 6th was a coup. Ukraine is a vitally important ally. Gender is a social construct. Climate change is an existential crisis. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And so on. These phrases are so common now that you might not even think about them anymore. You hear Biden or Pelosi repeat them for the 5th time in a single day and you just start to go numb. But take a break from the numbness, pause, and think about it. Consider each of these slogans on its merit. Are the words actually true? Do they correspond to reality, observed reality? No, they don't. None of them do.
And I'm going to end it there. But Tucker then went on to talk about Elon Musk then taking over Twitter. And he said, in part, that the fact that Elon Musk now has the biggest share in Twitter, you're going to have every single Democratic operative looking for a racist tweet, a sexist tweet, any kind of tweet that's going to be a problem at all. Like he just said about all of those things that you've been told to think, whether you believe them or not, whether it's, gender's a social construct, it's a pandemic on the unvaccinated, it's this, all the things that he just listed. Again, whether you believe in those or not, those are the phrases that are being pushed onto you. And God forbid if you go against any of those phrases, you could possibly get canceled, silenced, shadow banned, what have you. So with all of this being said now, there are going to be Democratic operatives because now all of a sudden Elon Musk is going to be a baby of the right wing. And that's the right wing has always been about free speech. That's always been their big token, of, free speech and don't touch my guns. I totally get it, But the biggest thing with all of this, though, is, again, now you have the United States trying to go after all of these Russian oligarchs, right? Going after all these Russian oligarchs. For example, you have this one guy, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who, if you haven't seen Citizen K on Amazon Prime, it's a great documentary about a guy who wasn't a Russian oligarch. But when the Soviet Union fell, it kind of goes through his life, how when the Soviet Union fell, they handed out all these vouchers to people. And what he did, and this was all supposed to be, you got your voucher and it was, it was basically like cash. And what he was doing is he was offering, innocent poor people like, hey, I'll give you 3 rubles for your voucher. And the fact that these people, the Soviet Union, they had no idea kind of really what these were. They would sell it to him thinking like, oh my gosh, the rubles are worth more, when in reality, these vouchers were worth more. And this guy ended up buying many of these oil companies from the state that were owned by Russia for next to nothing. And thus came in this privatization and capitalism in Russia. And you then created these oligarchs. And it was a very crazy time, and this documentary goes through all of it. But basically, he was charged with embezzlement, tax fraud, what have you, pretty much what all of the oligarchs here in the United States should be charged with. Because when Putin came in, he said, no. You either have one choice. You either are a businessman or you're a politician, but they're not mixing. Kharkovsky started to mix it, and he started to wind into financial problems and a bunch of other things. There was also reports where when he was going after one town for their oil company, the people kind of got mad and revolted, and the mayor kind of stood up for his people. All of a sudden, the mayor winds up dead. It's a very convoluted story, but in a sense, this guy goes away to prison for 10 years in Russia, and now is I don't want to say exiled, but he knows he really can't go back to Russia. Now he's a West Wing talking point. And now he's coming out for the West. If I know Putin and I know what he's going to do in free speech and blah, 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 blah. And I say to that, okay, what about what's happening here? Well, now you have American oligarchs, or at least Elon Musk could be that one oligarch in the coal mine saying, you know what? I'm kind of tired of all this. I'm tired of all of these people saying, I can't do this, I can't say that. The one difference that I think that's interesting with Elon Musk, he grew up in South Africa. Many people think he's American. He's not American. He grew up in South Africa. His mother was a Canadian citizen. He then went to school for a bit in Canada and then immigrated into the United States. So this guy wasn't indoctrinated with war is good, we need it, and the military-industrial complex and all that. He wasn't indoctrinated in all that. And he's seeing very much, I think, well above what our congressmen are seeing. He's seeing it as a big picture, whereas the congressmen are seeing what money can I get from my next lobbyist. And so when you have Elon Musk, who wipes his butt with dollar bills, or he could if he wanted to, when he starts saying, you know what, let's change the game. And remember, Jack Dorsey said not too long ago over the weekend that he regrets centralizing the internet because it was all about making money for these shareholders. And then it started to flip. Well, I think Elon Musk could be that one American oligarch that changes the game in opposition of the United States, in opposition of many of these against the insiders for the outsiders, mainly because I think Elon Musk is an outsider. He's not from the United States. He didn't grow up with our values, of freedom, go carpet bomb them if they don't want to do what you want to do. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting to watch this all unfold and see what he does with Twitter. Last night he did and the other thing that's interesting too is now that he has almost 10% of the company, he's asking people, what do you want from Twitter? Like for example, do you think Twitter's about free speech? 70% across the board. No. He's asking, do you want an edit button? Many people on Twitter don't want an edit button because they like the fact that you can't edit it and that you can call people out for deleting stuff instead of going back and editing it, which I actually agree with. I think if you say it, and like Taylor Lorenz, where she would tweet stuff out and then she would get called out, she'd delete it and then put her account private. People watch that stuff. And that's why I think it's good.
No, you're right. I like
you know what I mean?
Not having an edit button. Yeah,
exactly.
think about it.
At first I was like, yeah, I can have the edit button for misspellings, but think of the bigger picture.
Right, the more I think about it, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and that's what I think Elon Musk is doing is he's now looking at the bigger picture of all of this. Elon Musk is not an outsider. I'm not saying he's an outsider in the sense of he's not rich like the insiders. What I'm saying is I think he comes from a different set of values when it comes to American ideology that we've been ingrained in our entire lives. And again, I think Elon could change the game. I really think he might be able to change the game. If anything, put a lot of these congressmen, these lobbyists, the big tech especially, in check. While Jeff Bezos was up shooting his penis rocket in the sky, Amazon was unionizing, okay? He's not an outsider. He is very much on the inside. But you see, he's not, he's trying to do the Washington Post and all that, but Elon Musk going straight for the jugular of big tech and buying shares in Twitter. I don't see Jeff Bezos doing that. It could change the game. That's just, and I'm not saying I'm pro Elon Musk or against Elon Musk, because I know that there's controversies about whether he was for the jab or not. All I'm saying is I think he's going to change the game and literally do a checkmate on big tech as far as, hey, I'm rich, honey. I'll buy you out. Because he was talking about starting his own social media platform. Now he's like,
I just buy yours.
I'll just buy you.
Yeah, I just buy yours. Look, I agree with you on this to a point, I think. So there are a few things. Tucker Carlson is right. Completely so. That we require on some level this to stop people from thinking from themselves. Meaning television, radio, those are disruptive technologies. At the point where you can capture it, where you basically have a very confined point of view. Yeah, you may have CNN, you may have Fox News, you may have MSNBC, but you're basically stuck between those boundaries in regards to the politics that you can think of and discuss. And so having something like the internet and all of these points of view, it's disruptive. And so their ability to basically limit various things that come out with this, the New York Post article, where there's anything that's coming out with a perspective that you don't particularly like from the standpoint of the United States, meaning the way they would eliminate Telesur, the way they would eliminate the Palestinian perspective, they on a whim, in a heartbeat. And so the fact that Elon Musk comes out and says, hey, you know what? Free speech matters. An interesting thing, the only thing I think I disagree with it is our values. I mean, fact of the matter is the First Amendment is the First Amendment. Like it's there for a reason. This ability to have a conversation and discuss. And there are going to be things that come up in your society that will be disagreed by from the power structure.
But I think Elon Musk has talked more about free speech than any of people in Congress
and
right
that's
now.
my point. I mean, the people in Congress are very specific to this notion of limiting what comes out in regards to dialogue, especially if it's going to adversely affect them. If you remember, when Donald Trump won, what did they do? They attacked social media, meaning they went after Twitter, they went after Facebook, they dragged all of them to Congress. In order to kind of just browbeat them, is like, hey, you need to get rid of more content. You need to censor more content. It was basically that. And so from the standpoint of Twitter and social media basically responded to it. And so Elon Musk coming out basically saying, look, how do you have a democracy when you don't have the capacity to have discussions, especially uncomfortable discussions you may not necessarily want to have, discussions that may fly in the face of the power structure and the things that power structure would like you to discuss. If Ukraine is not an example of that, I don't know what is. So him coming out basically saying, yeah, I am rich beyond all measure, and I'm just going to buy it. And from here on out, I think this should be a free speech zone. Applause. Applause. Not a huge fan of Elon Musk. Love this move. Because at the end of the day, you have this, oftentimes they would say your commons, Twitter, Facebook, those things are commons. We don't have town criers where you just get out there and stand and scream. People do that, but those people are frowned upon in regards to the way society.
You crazy.
Yeah, right. That guy's nuts. It's something else, though, when you have these kind of social media platforms and their capability of basically limiting what people can say on those platforms. I love the fact that he's basically saying, look, I am a free speech absolutist. I think it is something required, not a bug, a feature of democracy. And if we're going to have these platforms like that, yeah, maybe some of these platforms should be free speech zones. Love it.
And again, for many of you in the chat, I see, where you're talking about it, where you're like, oh, Elon, he joked about overthrowing governments. Yeah, well, the United States actually did it. And maybe that's where he sees it. He's the only person that I'm seeing that's talking about overthrowing governments.
And by the way, this is not that a person is great as an absolute. I mean, if you get me in a bad moment, I'm going to be in a bad moment. This is something very specific that he is doing that you either approve of or disapprove of. And his rationale for it is Twitter. Look, all of you who are out there have complained about Twitter and censorship on Twitter. He is basically, whatever you think of Elon Musk, whatever you think of him, he could touch himself on the subway.
He's the Don Quixote riding in to save it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or not the Don Quixote because he was broke as hell.
But I know what you mean. Basically, he's coming in and is putting his finger in the crack in the wall in regards to you can't have a democracy without free speech.
Now, one of the things that has been rolling around the Twitter sphere too with all of this with Elon is letting Trump come back on Twitter.
He should.
Mhm.
He should have never been removed.
Along with Alex Jones.
Alex Jones should have never been removed from YouTube either. So, I mean, look, you can say what you will. You can take him in lawsuits. You can have at it, but you shouldn't move. There is something dramatically problematic with this idea of, I don't like your point of view, so I'm just going to eliminate your point of view. What if that point of view just so happens to be right? I'm not talking about the gay frog stuff. I'm talking about, and yeah, my mind specifically is on Ukraine right now just because it seems like we're in this weird twilight zone. But this notion of, hey, maybe in order to prevent war, you need to be able to articulate a point of view that may run afoul of the power structure. It's that. And it's like, if you can't do that, that's a problem. How do you have a democracy if you can't have those arguments, those points of view?
Now, Shakedown Street, Farron, this is not a good look for you trying to get a date with Elon. No offense. Not interested. Not interested. I think the guy's a genius, but I saw him on SNL and I was like, little awkward. I get it.
Yeah.
But you know what? I give him 1,000%. He has Asperger's and he's like, I'm the first one to come out here. And again, he's going to be socially awkward because of Asperger's and whatnot.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, he's just not my type. You know, it's just not my type. I like nerds, but not too nerdy. But here's the thing. Y'all are falling hook, line, and sinker.
This is not a falling hook, line, and sinker.
Here's what I'll tell you why I'm falling hook, line, and sinker, if that's what you think that I'm doing. I just had my TV network shut down.
That's right.
So when I see a guy come out and says, you know what? I don't care who you work for or what you're going to say. I'm going to give you that voice. Yeah, I'm going to fall for a hook, line, and sinker because I've had it happen to me.
And again, it's very specific to what we're talking about. You're like this notion that just because you're saying, hey, I like this move that Elon Musk is trying to make Twitter a free speech zone, that doesn't mean that you love Elon Musk as an absolute. It just means that in that very specific activity of what he is doing, I think it is a positive, not just for Twitter, but for democracy.
Yeah.
Democracy itself.
Yeah. And if he's talking about bringing back Donald Trump, if he's talking about bringing back Alex Jones, who was that canary in the coal mine of losing free speech, what is so bad about that? Why am I all of a sudden now defending Elon Musk for every little thing? That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying, I think with him talking about, hey, if you can't beat him, join him. And but his is more, if you can't beat him, buy him.
Right.
You know? And I think it's interesting. And I think, honestly, he's got the cojones. He's doing it. He's asking questions. It's the first that I've seen since a guy like a Jimmy Dore, a Russell Brand, where they're going to get flack. And that's the thing. Tucker said, you got every single Democratic operative now. They're going to look up a racist tweet, what he said, his stance on COVID, what he's done with women, what he's done with his kids, how he feels about, social issues, how he's tried to overthrow governments or joked about it. They're going to come for the gauntlet with this guy. And first of all, I don't think he cares. The test will be to see if he does remove people for making fun of SpaceX or anything.
Right.
But that will be the test. However, just do not let that fog fade, I guess, kind of deter you, because they're going to try to annihilate this guy strictly because even just mentioning Donald Trump and Twitter in the same sentence, oh man, you thought 2016 was bad? If Elon Musk gets in there, brings Donald Trump back on, it's World War III. It's World War III.
Fault lines, Thomas, Franzak, and Elon Musk.
We'll see. We'll ask Ed Martin's talk on it too. We're also going to be talking Hunter Biden, but we'll ask Ed Martin on it too.
See what his take on it. But you guys are listening to Fault Lines, Thomas and Franzak. Back in a moment.
Fault Lines. Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Farron Franzak, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys happen to find yourself in the D.C. area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also kicking around in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Farron and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps makes this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. And we were having this conversation about basically free speech zones. And Elon Musk taking a pretty big share, I think 10% of Twitter, and basically asking people, hey, what is the Twitter that you want? Specifically around this notion of free speech. To have a conversation about this, in addition to the Hunter Biden items that have come up, always something about Hunter Biden, we're joined with Ed Martin. Ed Martin is president of Facilis Scafly Eagles.
Phyllis Schlafly and Eagles.
Thank you, Schlafly Eagles, and author of Top 100 Trump Promises Made. Ed, thank you for joining us, man. How you doing this morning?
Hey, I'm doing great, Jamal. Thank you. Farron, good to talk to you. Yeah, I was listening in with you and interested in your take.
We wanted you to take your take right away, buddy.
Absolutely.
So fire away.
Well, on Elon Musk, the thing Elon Musk proved, and this is make you guys smile. He proved he's a better businessman than Trump. And
whoa, can we get that in writing, Ed? From the man that said 100 promises Trump made?
Yeah, no, by the way, it's 100 promises made, promises kept. That was the key thing. He kept the promise.
Oh.
Anyway, but Elon Musk looked at the field of social media. He said, I watched Parler try to start, and the powers that be killed Parler, right? I watched Gab start, and I see that they're getting sort of marginalized in lots of ways. Trump started his own social media outlet, and if you notice the news in the last 24 hours, two of the senior designers, the actual people that know how to run something that would be a social media platform, left that company, Trump Social, or Truth Social it's called. Now he's got Devin, who's a great guy, but Devin Nunes is a political guy and a media guy. So the people that know how to start a social media platform know it's almost impossible. Elon Musk looked at it and said, I'm not going to start my own. I'm going to go, as you said, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make a point. Now,
if you can't beat him, buy him is my new saying. If you can't beat him, buy him.
Yeah, the only problem is I need a little more money to buy him. I mean, you and I, Elon Musk has more than we do. But here's what I think he's done, which is a sort of win-win for him. Either he gets enough of the shareholders to come with him and radically change Twitter. And by the way, Jack Dorsey yesterday tweeted that he may sort of regrets how the internet came about, and what came about in it, which makes you wonder, is he talking to Elon Musk as Elon Musk does this? So if Musk is able to change Twitter dramatically and make it really about free speech, he wins. If he can't, he leaves and leaves them sort of we know who they are, which many of us do know. So the only question I have is, how does he do it, right? I think you can't say let back everybody without saying how it's going to work, right? Because you can't let really abhorrent things, that might be violent. They got to have some line you have to create. And I think the way he'll do it is more transparency. He'll say, if you want to stay, you can pick your algorithm, the one you want to be guided under, and then that will be like this. And then you can't complain if you're in a totally free zone. But it's going to be interesting to watch. It's exciting. And as you point out, Jamal, it's better today for our Democratic Republican America to have that conversation happening than it was yesterday. You and I could talk about how the propaganda out of Kyiv is this, or the propaganda out of the EU is that. That's a different argument than, hey, wait, aren't we supposed to have free speech? And Musk has pulled us out of the weeds and put us up in the clouds. Let's see what happens.
Well, and like I said, I thought it was interesting that you have him tweeting out a poll of, hey, do you think that Twitter's been free speech? And 70-30 in a poll of where 2 million people responded, they said, heck no. Then there's talks of him bringing back Donald Trump, Alex Jones, people that were kicked off. And Alex Jones was kind of that canary in the coal mine. And again, like Tucker Carlson said last night, you watch, every Democratic operative is going to be finding anything he said wrong, how he's treated his kids. Is he racist? Is he this? Is he that? Strictly to bring you outside of looking at the issue of free speech at hand and looking at how bad of a person he is. Very much like what they did with Trump.
Right. I think you're right. Again, Elon Musk proving he knows what every cable executive in the country knows. Trump is good for business, right? I mean, again, Elon knows that too. He cares about free speech. I think you're right about this, actually, Farron, that Elon Musk may be flying closer to the sun than he ever has. And this is not a small time. The power of the people who are influencing the propaganda, I call it the narrative machine. The narrative machine in this country right now is big tech, big media, and big government. And they work together, and we can transition right to Hunter Biden. They work together to take a narrative They define the narrative, and with very sophisticated means, algorithms, sure, but neuroscience more. And they go and they say, this is what it is. It's Russian disinformation, the Hunter Biden laptop. And then a year and a half later, it was verified. But don't focus on that. Where are the stories on the 51 senior intelligence community officials who signed the letter saying it was Russian disinformation? Those 51, nobody says this. They would have had top secret or higher clearance. They maintain that when they leave because it's a racket, and they let them keep that clearance so that they can go get jobs with media companies and everybody else. Where is the coverage? It's gone because the narrative machine says move on, and we're going to frame what the narrative machine is, and let's go look at this shiny object. So I think Elon Musk, as you say, Farron, he's put himself in the Klieg lights next to the sun, and he's got courage. I don't know if he's going to survive it, but he's got courage, that's for sure.
I want to go to a quick question, Ed. Brooke from Virginia, she has a comment on Elon Musk that I think we can discuss. Brooke from Virginia, what's your comment on Elon Musk?
Hey, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I would definitely like to say that I wholly appreciate what Elon Musk is doing. Like, as far as where I stand, I'm 32 years old, and I grew up in a time where, we didn't have curse words on TV. We didn't have nudity and all that jazz. Like, none of that was happening. And then, fast forward in the future, now we have kids swearing on TV. So all of that is craziness. But with that being said, I'm like, even though we have all of this nonsense on TV, then we turn around and what's supposed to be free, what we're supposed to be able to say what we want, how we feel. And essentially that's what we're doing, expressing how we feel. Now that's being censored, like even down to being a YouTuber, like you can't even post or say certain things on YouTube without, nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. Like that's very frustrating. Or to try to post something on Instagram or Facebook and they're like, nope, can't do that. And I'm like, so it's freedom of speech or not? Because that's definitely not how you guys are making this seem. It's definitely frustrating. And then as a small person who can't really do anything, all we can do is just sit here and wait the 21 days because now our account's deactivated or inactive or whatever because they're feeling like, okay, well, what you said was unnecessary. No, so I wholly appreciate what Elon Musk is doing. I definitely stand behind him.
Brooke, are you a first-time caller?
I am.
Well, you need to call back.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. You need to call more often now. I like your style. Thank you so much. Brooke from Virginia. Loved it. Ed, any final thoughts on Elon before we pivot over to Hunter Biden?
Only this. My only concern is sometimes we think we're debating free speech and the First Amendment, and we're and in this case I think we really are. But don't forget the power of what's really happening around us, right? I mean, yeah, Twitter is important and it is a voice, but around us is a whole lot of other information that is flooded towards us. And while I think this could be a crack in the foundation of what I call the narrative machine to have someone like Musk in there, it's a lot bigger problem, right? It's not just cable news. It's like I said, big tech broadly. Just go do a search engine analysis on what you're seeing in terms of who the heroes are in the world right now, and you say, how does that work? So anyway, I think it's good, and I think here's what Elon Musk has done: is created energy around the conversation, which we haven't had in a while, right? So that's great.
Now let's pivot to Hunter Biden, because the walls are kind of closing in on this little Hunty.
He's a grown man.
Yeah.
We wouldn't think it.
Hunty he's in trouble. Hunter Biden is apparently spending his father's presidency living in luxury in Malibu, and so is his taxpayer-funded security detail. Now, for those that don't know, when a president leaves the White House, he, along with his children, they get security details for the rest of their life, basically. Gerald Ford's kids, they still get security detail because they're a president's kid. It's just kind of a known thing. Jimmy Carter, 91, building Habitat for Humanity homes, still has a security detail. Doesn't matter.
And his kids will have it for the rest of his life. Age is not a number
for these people.
Yeah.
But money is a number, though, for this. The Secret Service detail protecting the president's controversial son has been paying more than $30,000 a month to rent out a swanky Malibu, California mansion for nearly a year. Sources familiar with the matter tell ABC News. Hunter Biden is living in Malibu with his new wife. And when you think about this guy and the amount of money that he's made from just not only Burisma, even more so from China, Ed. And then you have it where the American taxpayer is now paying not only for, all of his bad habits, being a crackhead, and then $30,000 a month for a security detail when this guy is under investigation for tax fraud. Ed, I mean, does your blood boil as much as mine does?
Well, it is, and first of all, let's say something like sane about this before I go off and rant. One is, we do want protection for the family of the president while he's president. By the way, I have to quibble with you. I checked while you were talking. The Secret Service stops for the children right after they're president. So, like, I remember.
Wait, really?
Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
I wasn't sure one way or the other.
They were so excited that they said Ivanka doesn't have security. You know, the media was like so happy to make that point. Yeah, and I remember it was Gerald Ford's son who told the story. Like literally, the Secret Service walked off the set. They looked at him.
Oh man, then I read the wrong.
You said they walked
I read
off
some
the
fake
set.
news then.
Say that again. You said Gerald Ford's son. They walked off the set. Explain.
No, Gerald Ford's son said it was like a movie. He said when it was 1 minute after his dad was no longer president, the Secret Service agent, basically dropped his guard, said it was nice to serve you, and walked out the door.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
then this must have been like a wrong. This person probably sourced it wrong because Chelsea Clinton still gets hers.
Well, let me qualify. There's one aspect of that. Let me finish one thought. I remember I was in St. Louis once, and Pope John Paul II was visiting, and so. At the time was Vice President Al Gore was sending him off. And when Al Gore and Bill Clinton was there the day before, when Al Gore and Bill Clinton, when the planes took off and they left, the Secret Service guys literally, you could see like all the energy go out of them and they like walked away. Like I can picture that in my head. Now I think something like Hillary, there are extenuating circumstances when they have threats and things. And I think probably there may be, I don't know the answer on Chelsea, but back to the point on this. So we want to protect the children of presidents so that they're not kidnapped and blackmailed and all that. But it gets comical when you have Hunter Biden who moves to Malibu. The corruption here is not the cost of the Secret Service. It's the reason he lives in Malibu and rents a mansion. He has tens of millions of dollars in his bank account. Go look at his laptop because he was dealing with China and Ukraine. And now he's in Malibu and he sets up and he's got a home. He's shameless. He did a New York Times magazine or New Yorker interview where he's sitting in his home in Malibu and he's got a garage that's converted into his art studio. Now, remember, Hunter Biden, before last year, wasn't an artist. Now he's a painter. And when he sells his paintings, they're anonymously purchased for $500,000 a pop. And so what happened is the Secret Service has to get a place next to his mansion that is funded by what I call influence peddling. It's not always illegal, but it's always wrong. And so here he is, and it's insane. And, there's a point here where the idea that the media is just now discovering this actually makes me wonder if they've decided they've had enough of Biden. Because this is really, or they've seen the laptop and they know it's actual corruption, as I haven't seen it. But now, because suddenly in the last 5 days, we're actually getting some coverage of the verified laptop, the exchanges. There's an email where obviously Joe Biden, we've now identified one of his Gmail accounts. There's an exchange where a photographer sends a photograph and says, here's your wife and your granddaughter in Arizona or somewhere. And it's to a Gmail account and he calls him sir. And I had a guy on my radio show and he told me that's the name that he used. I forget the name now. But my point is they're covering this. And what we need to get to now is what is the reality of Hunter Biden's corruption? And I don't know if we're ever going to get that, but we're getting more attention.
That's the interesting part to me. I mean, like,
and
my
let's
thing
not forget
was,
too, really quick. Ashley Biden is also set to have her wedding at the White House, and
that's not supposed to happen.
We're all paying for that, folks.
Yeah,
or at
that's
least
definitely
part
not
of
supposed to happen. I mean, that's the interesting part, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I noticed that myself. Initially, if you remember, they wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole, and of course, this was during the election, right? Because their thing is, okay, we don't want another Clinton email thing that basically puts Trump in office. So we're just going to pretend like this story doesn't exist, etc. Now, it seems the floodgates are open. The New York Times is covering it. The Washington Post is covering it. And is this where Biden has gotten so low in the polling and everything else where he is just fair game? And for that matter, what does it mean for the Republicans?
I'm sorry, his granddaughter Naomi is going to have her wedding at the White House. Even worse than the
same
daughter.
difference, right? That's not even his daughter. That's not even the daughter. I guess my thing is, what does this mean for the Republicans? Is this something that they are basically, meaning, are they chomping at the bit for Hunter with this idea that they're going to transfer this over to Biden, making it a point of saying, hey, if Hunter is corrupt, by definition, his dad is probably also implied.
You had the chief of staff, Ron Klain. He was asked by George Stephanopoulos, you mean to tell me that Joe Biden's brother and son have nothing to do with this. And he goes, nope, nothing. He doesn't know any of this.
Exactly.
The chief of staff.
But what we're seeing, and again, I hope it becomes instructive for and constructive for the country. What we're seeing is what I described at the beginning. I call it influence peddling. When you're a senator at age 30, everybody around you, if you stay in office like you did, becomes really rich. So Joe Biden's brother is really rich. Joe Biden's sister was his campaign manager. I told someone, go look at the FEC filings and see how much money she was paid to be his campaign manager for the last 30 years. Because what happens is you put him on the payroll and you pay him. You're a senator for 6 years. You pay him the whole time you're in office. And so everybody around him starts to influence peddle. And at a certain point, Biden clearly was comfortable with it, Joe Biden. And now the question is only whether it's corruption. And, we're back to Ukraine. If it's true that the exchanges that were happening at the time that Joe Biden was demanding changes in the prosecution, it's either an indication of corruption by Joe Biden, or his kid was corrupt and his dad was duped. I tend to actually think his dad was duped, but only in the sense that he allows it to happen. It's like a wink and a nod. And the system is like that. Pick a senior senator, and almost every one of them is like that in America. Because why? Because the amount of power and money in Washington, D.C. has gotten so big that they just go ahead and do that. So whether the Republicans are chomping at the bit or not, the country is looking up and saying, drain that swamp.
And let me tell you something. Ed, we both know, because this plot even thickens even more, because my mother's been texting me, because my mom's like, I can't believe that. It's Hunter Biden's daughter, Naomi, that's getting married at the White House. If this was Donald Trump Jr.'s daughter,
imagine what they would say.
And Donald Trump Jr. was a crackhead, which Trump would never allow. He doesn't even allow his kids to drink. But if this was Donald Trump Jr.'s daughter getting married at the White House, there would be pandemonium, God forbid, draft impeachment papers. I mean, it would be insane.
Imagine what would have happened if it was Trump's kid with that laptop. Think about that. Like if they would have found Trump's kid and it was like, hey, we have this laptop from Trump's kid with all of this corruption stuff in it that implicates, they would have went,
First of all, how many M&Ms? How many M&Ms?
Right.
Right. But Ed, I want to bring this up because this is literally just breaking, and I want to get your comment because we were talking about Elon Musk before. Breaking news: Elon Musk is joining Twitter's board of directors.
Whoa!
A day after disclosing that the Tesla CEO took a almost 10% stake in the social media platform, Twitter Inc. said it entered into an agreement with Musk that he will be given a seat on its board.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
What does it mean, Ed? What does it mean?
Well, what it means to me is Jack Dorsey's in on it. Because
really?
You
you're
so?
Right. He said the other day he regrets centralizing.
Yeah.
And if Jack Dorsey, I gotta think Twitter has so much money, they've set up the ways to fight off. This isn't like what was it, TWA or American back in the day, or some Chrysler, where you've got a hostile takeover, a hostile board seat. That it strikes me that or the response to Elon Musk was such that the Twitter board couldn't do that. But now the question is, what I ought to be a fly on the wall at the first board meeting.
Oh, yeah.
What we don't know now is, can a board of directors member, can he or she, what can they do? Sometimes boards are activists, sometimes they're not. Is there another set? Like Zuckerberg has a board, but he actually controls most of the stock that controls the board in another way. I don't think we know what the legal setup is here, but it sounds like Dorsey's voice, if he's saying, I want to change it up too, then things are going to get interesting fast.
Well, and here's the thing is part of me thinks that, if you're in that boardroom and you have Sally, Jane, and John, and Elon Musk isn't getting his way, he's like, hey, John, how many shares do you have? Here, I'll give you 10 billion.
Right.
Give me your shares. And he's like, well, okay.
Elon Musk has all the money in the world to buy shares at this point. I guess, I'm curious with you on this one, Ed. Like, basically, what does this mean? And will Musk be able to assert a certain amount of authority in that organization in order to do the free speech stuff? Because they've definitely it seems they've been censoring more since Jack Dorsey left.
The one thing with Musk is it doesn't mean what we think it does. I mean, my point is he very rarely goes linear like you and I think. And so whether he's coming in, he may disappoint conservatives by saying, you know what, I'm going to make it a free speech zone looking like this. I remember Jack Dorsey proposed a few years ago that Twitter should adjust its model and allow people to, I think the phrase was mine, but he basically said, choose their own algorithm. You can look at the thing, come in and say, I think Jack Dorsey wanted change and didn't think he could do it. If he's teamed up with Elon Musk, or at least given his tacit sort of indication, go there. I think Musk will do something, will say something like that. And I think you're right. You guys came onto it. I think the first thing they might do is let some people that were off come back with some way. And imagine just simply if Trump came back. Now, the world that the left can't quit Twitter. They're hooked on it.
They are, Ed. But you know what, Ed? We're coming up to a hard break. We want to thank you so much for dialing in. Ed Martin, the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles and author of Top 100 Trump Promises Made, Promises Kept. Naomi Biden is getting married on my birthday, November 19th. Start buying my gifts now. And we're going to have a wedding special. Ed Martin's going to be on that special with us. We're going to dress up and everything. Fault Lines, rumble.com/fault lines. We're back in 2 minutes. The Naomi Biden wedding special. It's going to happen.
Fault Lines. Fault Lines.
Live from the University of Kansas men's basketball locker room, sitting atop the transmission tower of truth, taking down hypocrisy one lie at a time. The NCAA championship, Kansas men's basketball, remind you. In the ladies' corner. Never ad-lib, right? In the ladies' corner. My trolls call me Moscow Mary, but I'm your pierogi princess, your journalist extraordinaire, American Farron Franzak.
And in the left corner, wondering why she's in the locker room, I am your indefatigable, your ever vigilant, your last man on the wall, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
Which means you're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Franzak.
Yeah, ad-libbing is always treacherous.
It's always shaky ground, folks.
Sometimes you can do it, sometimes not so
But
much.
hang on one second. I need to check November 19th, 2022. What day? It is,
If that's a Saturday, that's going to ruin
It is a Saturday.
Oh,
but so, hang on.
Oh, it's ruined.
So Friday, we're going to have the what is it? The wedding party dinner.
Yeah.
We're going to have it in the morning. We're going to dress up. I'm going to have the big hat. You're going to be in a tux. We're going to have the whole shebang. The Naomi wedding, the day before wedding party. It's going to happen like the Kentucky Derby.
Because it's going to be at the White House, right?
Exactly.
I mean, all of us are involved.
We're going to go from here and we're going to walk over to the White House.
Because they're using the people's house.
Yeah.
For
They
that
say, we're
wedding.
here for the wedding.
Yeah.
We will literally be the wedding crashers.
I mean, it shouldn't even be a crash at that point. That's our house.
Exactly.
That's our house.
The people's house.
Yeah.
But
they're having a wedding at our house.
Can you imagine?
You got to dress up for it.
I'm going to have like the all one colored, the big hat, everything. They're going to be like,
Mr. President, there are two people from Sputnik here dressed
that
to the
are
nines.
completely crazy.
Right. right.
They say they're from Sputnik, but we think they're actually from the mental institution.
Right. It's like he's wearing pink chucks and a tux.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They both look like Easter eggs.
It's like, we're here for the wedding. We're here for the wedding.
Let's do it. So we have a special guest coming up at 9:30. We have the one, the only, the former host of In Question, Manila Chan.
Oh, she's joining us.
Manila Chan is coming at 9:30.
Great. Manila's awesome.
Yeah.
She's back on vacation. That's great.
Larry Fine, a drunken Farron will sing Bohemian Rhapsody at the reception.
I will be there for that.
I do not have to be drunk to sing that. I will sing it completely sober.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think the drunk version would be fantastic.
No,
though.
I get off key and it just doesn't work.
That would be great.
They're like, oh, God, I thought she was a good singer. Now she's like, all, yeah, no. Plus, it's weird. As you get older, your hangovers get worse and...
Yes, that is very true. Well,
yeah, I'm just kind of over
It's very
it.
weird. I rarely get hangovers. I would get sick in the moment. I am, as a drunk, I still am me. Like, I never lose this. It's like I'm still conscious, I'm still aware, etc. I may be a little bit more gregarious or a little bit more, I don't know, impulse, control, that type of stuff. But I usually get sick in the moment. It's usually at the hangover. When I was younger, I used to be hangover.
We have in my family, my siblings and I call it the Franzak curse.
Yeah.
Where, because my father is Polish and Russian and a little bit of Belarusian, if you want to count all the borders and stuff. And my mom is Italian and Irish. And
Hell of a mix.
and we say it's the Franzak curse. Like we always say, like with my father, we were born with a 0.08 alcohol, and my mother doesn't even drink. It's just kind of in the Russian Polish blood, right? But like we've always said, like we'll go out and like we'll have like a shot or something, and like we just don't feel it until like the very night when we go home, and then we're like, oh. And we call it the Franzak curse. Like we just don't feel it when we're out.
Yeah.
And until maybe like later on in the night. And so that's just a point of maybe you should just shouldn't drink.
When
so
I was
that's
in
kind of where I'm
Czech
at.
Republic, I am looking for a chess club in the area. And I see chess pieces on the window. I go to the place, it's a bar. And the guy who's in there is
Czech
like,
Republic.
yeah, it's in a bar, right? He's like, American? Now, he doesn't speak English, but he knows American. They start pouring vodka shot after vodka shot after vodka shot. We were using a little Google thing to communicate.
They wanted your money, Jamaro.
No, they bought it for free. They were just buying it.
Oh,
he was
wow.
buying it for me.
Oh, you mean, okay, I see.
Yeah, he was like, oh, American, welcome to Czech Republic. And he's buying drink after drink. And I'm like 3 or 4 shots of vodka in. And I'm like, dude, I'd have to leave, man.
This ought
is
to be
intense.
good.
Yeah, this is intense. And he's still like, I have pictures of the guy. All of us were like hugging and everything else. It was a great experience. You can't turn them down because
From what you remember.
Yes. I get home, throw up, out of it for the rest of the night. Like, just wasted. It took everything in me just to get home, just to collapse when I get home.
Yeah, just like the slow, like,
Yeah, it's like, oh, just
must
make it in.
make it to
Let's
door.
make it to the door.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But let's get to some headlines, and then we're going to take your calls after this. 202-521-1320. 202-521-1320. We're going to be taking calls till about 9:30 till we have our beautiful guest, Manila Chan, coming on, talking about all things pop culture, Ukraine, what have you.
There are plenty of clips also.
Yeah, and we'll let Manila kind of take it. But in your COVID headlines, Republican and Democratic negotiators forged a deal Monday that will direct $10 billion to pay for vaccines, therapeutics, and domestic COVID health response tools. Senator Mitt Romney says the bill won't cost the American people a single additional dollar. This agreement represents only about half of the $22.5 billion President Joe Biden initially requested and is lower than a $15 billion version hammered out last month. Chinese authorities say the People's Republic witnessed a significant spike in COVID cases after the country imposed a lockdown in the large city of Shanghai. Beijing reports the country saw 16,412 new daily coronavirus cases this week, the most since the pandemic began. In your national news, the jury selection process has begun for Nicholas Cruz, the person behind the mass shooting at Parkland's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. More than 120 of the first 160 prospective jurors were dismissed due to their inability to serve from the months of June through September. The jury will determine if Cruz will get life in prison or a sentence of death for murdering 17 people. It looks like Donald Trump's endorsement of Sarah Palin for U.S. Congress has paid dividends for the former governor of Alaska. According to the odds makers at Betfair, Palin's original odds to win the election were 7-1. However, since Trump's endorsement, the former governor's odds have improved 4-1. Trump's endorsement made headlines Sunday as the former president raved about Palin and praised the candidate for her previous support. Sacramento police say authorities made their first arrest in connection to the weekend shooting that left 6 dead and a dozen others injured. 26-year-old DeAndre Martin was taken into custody and charged with assault with a firearm, as well as being a prohibited person in possession of a firearm. Martin was not arrested for homicide. Kim Yo-jong, of the Workers' Party of Korea, says if South Korea followed through on recent threats of a preemptive strike against the North, Pyongyang would reply with nuclear weapons. Quote, in case South Korea opts for military confrontation with us, our nuclear combat force will inevitably have to carry out its duty, Kim said in a statement. 2 referendums may be held in South Ossetia, first on joining Russia, the second on reunification with Russia's North Ossetia. This told by the Republic's president, Anatoly Babilov, to Sputnik. Babilov says consultations with Moscow are underway and the referendum could happen after April 10th. The United Kingdom's refusal to hold a UN Security Council meeting requested by Russia on allegations of atrocities in the Ukrainian town of Bucha is unprecedented in UN history, Russian ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, says. He added that holding a meeting would not benefit Western delegations and the anti-Russian narrative they promote. Russia has now requested a Security Council meeting today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss the Bucha allegations. In your tech news, Truth Social Chief Technology Officer Josh Adams and Billy Boozer, head of the product of development, have resigned from their respective roles amid the venture's fumbled rollout and uncertain future. A report detailed that Boozer and Adams, described by one individual as the brains behind the app's technology, initially embraced the anti-cancel culture and free speech mission laid out by higher-ups. And after buying more than 9.2 shares of Twitter yesterday, Elon Musk now is joining Twitter's board of directors a day after disclosing that the Tesla CEO took up around almost near 10% stakes in the social media platform. Twitter Inc. said it entered into an agreement with Musk that will give the billionaire a seat on its board. In your Earth and Science news, an unknown creature thought to be an alien washed ashore on an Australian beach recently. According to the publication, the weirdly bloated creature, whose head has been defleshed and body looks more like a swollen alien, washed ashore last week and stirred rumors on social media that this creature was indeed an alien. Russell Bicknell, a marine biologist, however, told Live Science he thinks it's either a kangaroo or a wallaby. So for all the alien gurus out there, sorry, Jamaro. In your business news, Hungarian energy company MVM is discussing with Russian energy giant Gazprom on the issue of making gas payments in the Russian currency. Russian ambassador to Hungary, Yevgeny Stanislavlov, said in an interview with Sputnik. Oil prices jumped as much as 4%, returning U.S. crude to above $100 per barrel as more Western sanctions planned for Russia, along with news of a hike in Saudi selling prices, helped the market rebound from last week's worst sell-off in 2 years. And in your WTF news, police in Britain were dealing with a tasty traffic obstruction Monday when a truck lost its load of cookies on the roadway. Police tweeting out, "Please bear with us this evening as we try and digest the issue. A lorry load of McVitie's finest have decided to abandon ship, causing a slight obstruction. No reports of injuries from the spilled biscuits," aka cookies here. Your holidays today, National Deep Dish Pizza Day. Shout out to Lou Malnati's in Chicago, the only deep dish pizza you should eat in Chicago. We're not sponsored, but maybe we could be. First Contact Day, celebrate all things Star Trek for this weirdo over here. National Caramel Day, National Flash Drive Day, and Read a Roadmap Day. That's right, get rid of Google Maps today. See how far you get. Today in history, 1994 was Kurt Cobain's death. 1951, the Rosenbergs were sentenced to death for spying for Russia. In 1955, Winston Churchill retired as prime minister. And in 1984, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar broke the NBA all-time scoring record. Those are your headlines for April 5th, 2022.
One more headline. One more headline.
Geez, what is it?
John Kiriakou and Michelle Witte, shout out for this. This came out today. The Sun. We filed a Freedom of Information Act just days after the existence of the shadowy program had been made public. Finally, after more than 4 years, the Defense Intelligence Agency released more than 1,500 documents. It includes government-commissioned scientific reports and letters to the Pentagon regarding the UFO program. The whole includes reports into research on biological effects of UFO sightings on humans, set out categorizations of paranormal experiences, and studies into sci-fi style technology. The DIA, Department of Defense spy arm, said, quote, "Some portions of the documents must be withheld in part due to privacy and confidentiality concerns," but the agency added that the DIA has not withheld any reasonably segregated, non-exempt portions of the records. The bombshell Freedom of Information Act call includes reports on the DIA's research into biological effects of UFO sightings on humans. This includes burns, heart problems, sleep disturbances, and even bizarre occurrences such as apparent abductions and unaccounted for pregnancies. Whoa! Like, that is extreme.
So that's why I'm not sleeping good?
Well, no, I mean, think about what they're saying for the moment. Like, here's the thing. If the government comes out and admits that there are UFOs, okay, fair enough. You did it. The document came out. They've acknowledged it. You get stuck with a lot of stuff that is in that box that we have no idea what's in that box. And the fact that these documents are talking about abductions and pregnancy, that is like the UFO community does not want to touch that.
Well, I just have one question. Do you think these aliens know that Stacey Abrams was declared Empress of the Earth?
Yes. Yes, they do.
It was on the new Star Trek.
Yes, they do. Right. Oh, is this Discovery or is this...
It's from Blank State.
Discovery
Stacey
is horrible.
Abrams was declared Empress of Earth or something on the new Star Trek.
Discovery is horrible. I don't even call that Star
Trending
Trek.
on Twitter, he says.
I don't even call
Stacey
Discovery Star Trek.
Abrams.
It is so bad. It is so horrific of a series. To be fair, season 4 was okay, but that is not Star Trek, and they bastardize it by calling it that. They're coming out with Christopher.
I'm just going to let you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Here.
That's right. You don't pay attention to Star Trek.
No. I'm saying I want you to vent here because it's your day.
All right. Discovery is not Star Trek. What Discovery did was basically use identity politics and wrapped it into something that they wanted to call Star Trek. So oftentimes throughout it, you were here, you were seen. And I never understood why they kept saying that. And I realized, that is the LGBT stuff that they've basically grounded and
you are seen. What is it normally?
They never say that. It's like they add in commentary from today.
Again, I'm a Star Wars girl, so this is all new to me.
It's all new to me too because Star Trek doesn't typically do that. Star Trek is already
so that would be
very
like
lefty.
that would be like the Force be with they.
Yeah, right. Yes, it's that where it's like where they've added all of this content about being seen or being out of the closet and stuff like that. Star Trek is not that. Even this notion of Burnham and having Burnham being in everything. She's not a captain, at least wasn't, and yet every decision went through Burnham. And she was doing stuff. Within the first episode, within the first 15 minutes, she had already attacked the captain of the show. That has never happened on Star Trek. It's so beyond the pale. Look, they're coming out with Christopher Pike is going to have a series. And that series is going to be phenomenal. And that is going to be the Star Trek that people expect it. That is going to be a Star Trek that people get. And one last thing before it's a Star Trek thing.
Because I have another question after this too.
Okay, one last thing. One of the best episodes in Discovery, I don't like Discovery under normal circumstances, one of the best episodes, Christopher Pike. Christopher Pike, anybody who watched the original series knows that there's a point where Christopher Pike ends up in a wheelchair with a little butter that says beep, beep for yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
He gets crushed. And so seeing Christopher Pike in his heyday is this kind of real great experience for people to watch. All right. Christopher Pike needs to accomplish an objective. He needs a time crystal. He goes to Kronos. He grabs the crystal and he sees his fate. He falls back and he sees himself get utterly and entirely destroyed in the event that puts him in that wheelchair. The Klingon tells him, if you take it, that is your fate. You're stuck with it. And he's getting himself together. He's like, I'm a Starfleet officer. And the reason he's saying that is because what he needs to do in this particular moment is take that crystal. And as a man, he doesn't necessarily want to do it. But the fact he's an officer extends beyond the fact of him just being a man. He is more than just a man in his conception of things. And so, as a Starfleet officer, he takes that crystal. He accepts his fate, knowing full well that that is going to happen to him. And he does so because he needs to do it to accomplish his objective.
That is an amazing story. You should save that for dates.
I do. First thing, how do you think I got married?
I actually do.
How do you think I was like, one of the best episodes of Discovery? Or talking about the Cisco one where he basically gets the Romulans into the war. That dates love that stuff.
No, but I do actually have a great question though, because last night, and this is so weird, you guys, I think I'm like a prophet or something because I watch a documentary and then I see it all the time now.
Yeah.
Guess the documentary I watched last night going to bed?
Something about Shaq. Oh, The Captains.
Unacknowledged.
Really? Stephen Greer.
I watched it a bunch of times, okay? But it's one of my favorite documentaries.
Oh, you like it?
Oh, I love the UFO stuff. But hang on. So a new one just came out this month featuring Dr. Stephen Greer again called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Yes.
What a lot of people don't know about me is when I lived in El Paso, Texas, a lot of weird stuff happens out in the Southwest.
Yes.
And when I watched Unacknowledged, which is where I first saw it out there, I had a friend that was super into aliens out there.
Yeah.
And you have Los Alamos, which is White Sands, which is not too far from El Paso.
Oh, yeah.
And I went and rode around because it is really white sand. It's super cool. But aliens are like a big thing out there. And people always talk about seeing stuff out there.
Uh-huh.
I personally never have, but that's when I originally started getting in aliens when I moved out there.
You should hear John.
I'm sure he's got stories. But so Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind just came out this month.
Uh-huh.
Documentary talking about A documentary featuring Stephen Greer, apostle
Well,
of
they're
the
trying to make
alien
contact.
visitation disclosure movement, has a tantalizing sightings, but reveals that ET obsession is now the mothership of a conspiracy
Yes.
theory, and how he brings in more and more people who had these problems sleeping, like heart murmurs and people. I don't think there's anything pregnant, but like in the report.
Yeah.
But
You're talking
this
about
is the
human
latest
biological
one.
effects.
Yeah.
So Greer takes it to a whole nother level. And Greer's reputation in the UFO community is complicated. I mean, Greer
I remember talking about this with you too.
Yeah,
where you
Greer
said
makes
it's a
this
little-
argument where he's like, there are no bad aliens. And people immediately like, how do you know that? Like, just me, like, how do you know that? And even this notion of him trying to make contact. They go out for these contact motion things where they're this kind of directed thought with this idea of telepathic communication and everything else. But the idea of trying to draw that stuff to them. And so Greer does this across the United States, the area that you were talking about, like White Sands. They go out to
The other one
California
is in
somewhere.
Colorado. He goes out
Yeah,
to a lot.
Colorado is another place.
Because of the altitude.
Yeah. And so Greer's point is he believes that all of the stuff that's taking place from the Pentagon releasing this stuff is in order to get almost like a psyop. That's his thought, that they're trying to create a context for a larger world conflict. Greer hasn't put anything out there to back that up per se, even though you can't necessarily, I guess, entirely dismiss him. But yeah, he's a complicated UFO figure. He's very complicated. I mean, he even goes into like animatronic beings going after to get people. It's way out there.
That I didn't get that far, but what I did find interesting though, and just because I have my own family and my own dad who's a physician, the fact that he was an ER doctor,
Yeah.
I tend to
In Virginia, actually.
often, I thought he was in North Carolina.
Well, he used to practice in Virginia. I don't know where he is now.
Oh, okay,
But yeah, he
now
definitely
he's
used
in
to
North
practice
Carolina,
Virginia.
I think. But who knows? This unacknowledged came out in what 2018?
Yeah, it was a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a huge hit, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I just think that sometimes doctors, they can see things, for example, like I even remember having talks with my father of, my dad grew up very religious in a Polish-Russian family, very Catholic in Chicago, where, he even listens to the masses in Latin and likes to do that once a year. And my whole families are like, oh my God. Yeah, and you have to wear the veil and everything. But then being a doctor, there is this whole dichotomy of, okay, yes, I believe in a higher power, but at the same time, science is science, and it's
But they
that
don't
whole
contradict.
difference.
They don't contradict.
No, but at the same time, for example, and I just again, like I've had numbers of talks with him on this, because he was a neurosurgeon, and there was times he was working on, he was out of 10 different hospitals, and when he was a young doctor, he was having to be in the ER, and somebody gets shot, and from the head up. And, you have the parents, oh, Johnny's a fighter. Johnny's a fighter. He's going to make it through. I've been praying. Johnny's a fighter. And my dad's like, Johnny's not making it. Johnny's not making it. So that's one of the things where I think with doctors, they have to balance that. But I feel like doctors can do most doctors that I've met, who's to say about the new ones coming up, but they have a good, even scientists, engineers, they can balance that fact versus, I don't want to say fiction, but,
You and I have
you know what I mean?
different takes on doctors just because your dad was a doctor and you're closer to him. And my experience with doctors were not that positive.
Well, a lot of times, as my father used to say, they're going to tell you the worst. So, they're not, going to be, you got 6 months to live, but you can probably make it to a year. Doctors are going to tell you scientifically, the books look like 6 months.
Exactly.
And
they give you their take.
Well, not even that. They have to give you the truth. You want some doctor telling you it's a year and then it's only going to be 3 months?
Yeah.
But one thing that because my father actually was the one that broke to my mom's mom when she had pancreatic cancer. He was in on the surgery and everything. And he said, here's the difference between me and you. And I thought this was so profound. He was like, they say you have 6 months to live. She lived for 15, by the way. He said, I could go out and walk across the street and get hit by a truck. And then there's the end of me. You don't know. And that's the thing is they give you a time frame, but a lot of times, even my mom has always said, who's a nurse, she says, doctors diagnose, nurses cure, mind you, for all the nurses out there. But she has said, they give you this time frame, but again, she's even said, your father didn't really like giving time frames because then people are like, doctor, it's been 6 months.
And how
Why
does
am I
he
not
know?
dead?
Yeah. He can only give you based on what I know, et cetera, this is what it looks like. But there's a certain amount of hubris with that, which I totally understand why he doesn't want to do that.
I will say, though, I was blessed. I won the parent lottery, and, their thoughts on medicine and all that, I don't know what's going to happen with me when they go. I don't even want to think about it. But
we have callers.
We do have callers, and they're probably like, shut up, Karen.
So let's go to David, South Carolina. David, what's going on, my man? What's the topic for today?
I was like, shut up, Farron, and I'm just kidding.
You can say it. It's fine.
I wanted to say, first of all, Jamaral, I wanted to say the chat was on your side. And it is totally okay to shake your head. It's totally natural to do in conversation.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Well, what's the other topic?
To be fair, I just said why I was uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Just because I've been
Yeah,
caught
she
off
didn't
my
take a hit.
face.
She just said she was uncomfortable with it.
Oh, Farron, I totally understand the reasoning. Now, I told you the Europeans are far gone on this. Your person was far gone.
Mm-hmm.
He was far gone on the NATO thing.
But look, I appreciate that conversation, believe it or not. Believe it or not, I enjoy those conversations. Because to me, it's like, go, please, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I wish that y'all would have kind of like butted in there in terms of there are some things which are like objectively false. And I know you want to be respectful and all that and let your guests talk. But yeah, I mean, some of the premise was just completely off, like you said. So
well, the NATO thing just didn't make sense. It's like Europe tried to bring Russia in by expanding NATO. It's like, what? Say that again? It's like, why do you think that?
And to say that the U.S. isn't involved in Ukraine and pulling the strings in Ukraine is...
Well, you heard me repeat that, right? It's like, what?
Well, that was okay, you lost me, buddy.
Yeah, right. I was like, what?
I was trying to help you out, but now you just lost me.
It's like they literally knocked over the government. Zelensky was a puppet. I mean, it's like, he's like, yeah. Zelensky is his own man. Okay, sure.
Yeah, yeah, that was just very interesting to hear. And I know that's the majority of people in the West. That's what the media narrative is. So of course people, and also the State Department narrative, the ministries of defense, whatever it is.
That's why I appreciate him coming on. I mean, we've been trying to get opposition to come on for a while now to have the conversation like that, and we didn't know where he was on this. Oftentimes, like I know sometimes we bring people on. Oftentimes, this was one of those situations where we've tried to get various people who would take opposition on this very specific issue to have that conversation. Because in our heads, that's the way you have a legitimate conversation for people to decide where they fall on a particular issue. You elucidate it. This is their position. This is my position. You make the choice. I enjoyed it personally.
Yeah, I wish that y'all would have gotten your position down more. But I understand, time constraints. And then also I'm kind of uncomfortable about the Elon Musk situation. Like we say, corporatism is, kind of leads into fascism. So I think in this case, it's good that he, got a good stake, and hopefully it'll do some good in terms of free speech stuff. But it kind of put all our eggs in the Elon Musk basket. Kind of, it doesn't sit right with me.
Because I feel him on that one, right? I don't like this notion of a billionaire coming to the rescue.
It is. And I've often said, you have that quote by basically Mr. Fascism himself, Benito Mussolini, who said, fascism, another name is corporatism. So I totally understand what you're saying. However, I say, let's just see what happens.
Right.
Let's just see.
We're stuck with it anyway, right?
If Donald Trump comes back on Twitter, if Alex Jones comes back on Twitter, I say let's see. Let's hear him out. Let's see what happens.
And by the way, he may have an ideological...
He's only got 10%.
And he may have an ideological position for free speech, which, again, I accept.
Yeah.
I accept.
I say we see what happens.
David, thank you, my man. I appreciate the call. Alex in Mexico. Alex, what's going on?
Hi, I would like to make 3 points. What I think is going on is that Trump fractured the intelligence community, and there are factions that are trying to do a lot of things at once. So the people who is trying to get a war, Ukraine-Russia, succeeded, but they are not looking at the people with Saudi Arabia, China, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a cluster.
You say it's a cluster? It is a cluster. I agree with you on that point. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that.
Did you have one more point, Alex?
Yeah, microwave cameras. When you put your microwave oven, do you remember this girl, Betsy DeVos, said it?
I don't think so. But keep going, though.
On the Trump campaign, at the beginning of when Trump was elected, she said it. And I don't know if you heard about the microwave imaging. I mean, radar imaging.
Oh, you mean for the UFO stuff?
Oh, yeah.
You mean when the people were basically the new technology was picking up aircraft, and people were like, "Hey, we're starting to see stuff," and you had those pilots coming out basically saying, "We've been picking up all of these things on our radar and stuff like that." Is that what you mean?
No, I mean like for terrain and stuff, they do it with radar.
Oh, are you talking about when he was talking about how he can manipulate the weather?
For weather and all that, you
I see.
get images from radar. You know that? Probably you've heard that, right?
I remember him talking about it, but I remember that was very early on in his presidency, and honestly, that feels like a decade ago.
Yeah, it feels like forever. Yeah, it does. But honestly, Biden has only been in, what, a year? It feels like it's been
I know,
so
right?
long. But look, Alex, thank you, my man. I appreciate the call.
Gracias, señor mucho.
Thank you for the second call. We have Manila Chan coming up. You guys are listening to Fault Lines. Thomas, Franzak. Back in a moment.
Fault lines. Fault lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Farron Franzak. I'm coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys just so happen to find yourself in the D.C. area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM at 1390 AM. We're also kicking around in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Farron and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. And we have a litany of topics that we can hit with our next guest. She is one of my favorite people on this channel, or that from the standpoint of a guest and a regular guest. We're joined with Manila Chan. She's a veteran news anchor and host of RT America's daily news program, or at the very least was, In Question. Manila, welcome back to the show. How you doing this morning?
Good morning, you two. It's bright and early here in sunny Southern California.
You're in Cali. Okay, fair enough. I thought you were back in D.C., so you're still on vacation.
We can call it vacation, sure. I mean, this is home for me, right? Like, this is me visiting family, running errands, mostly running errands for everybody. So it's not too much of a vacation, but I'm in sunny Southern California. I can't complain.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this. Are you a Star Trek person? We were having the conversation about Star Trek in the beginning before it started, not to mention the UFO stuff. But today is supposed to be Star Trek Day. Is that something that you grew up watching or you weren't a big fan of it?
It is, isn't it? Is it Star Trek Day? Maybe, is it? No, it's not.
It is. Let me see. I even read the headline. I even have my Star Trek shirt on. It's First Contact Day, celebration of all things Star Trek.
You had me for a second. I'm more Star Wars.
Me too, baby. May the Force be with you. There's only one return, and it's of the Jedi.
Okay, well, let's skip that topic. Well, there's an aspirational aspect of Star Trek. That's all. That I was going to get into this notion of the world coming together and everything else and getting past all of the stuff. But let's skip that part. How are you doing? Let's start off with that part first. We haven't spoken since, I don't think we've spoken since RT closed.
Yeah.
How are you doing so far? Dealing with all of that, per se. I might as well get your take on it before we start.
Sweet, right? Filling in for Lee Stranahan. I ran away to California because, what else does a girl do?
I was going to ask you, how is it out there? Are the tents coming closer and inching towards you?
Let me first say that, oh my gosh, upon landing at LAX, you can see the gas prices when you're flying in because, LAX is really just buried in the middle of the city.
What are the gas prices there, by the way?
Holy smokes. When you're by LAX, you know how everything's more expensive around an airport? Well, we are looking at like $7 a gallon for 87 gas around LAX, and all the way up to like $8 and some change for the premium gas. And it's only slightly better when you travel away into the suburbs, but I mean, that's where I am. But holy smokes, we are talking $6 out in the suburbs for 87 regular gas. I mean, it is nuts out here. I have friends, they drive, an SUV because they have several kids, and it's costing them like $200 to fill up the tank. That is insane.
We got to pay for our values, Manila. That's what Jen Psaki said. We got to pay for our values. I mean, keep in mind the reason and then inflation and everything else. All of that stuff is just basically being made worse by the geopolitical situation. You cover geopolitics. Do you have a commentary on that before I said we get started, but we already started. on the situations that are basically taking place, whether it's Bucha, whether it's the events on the ground in Ukraine, whether it's the Western take on it, meaning Europe shooting itself in the face in order to show its allegiance to the United States on this front. I mean, however bad you get in it, it's worse in Europe. What are your thoughts?
Gosh, on all of that, I think first and foremost, I know it's going to sound like I'm some isolationist or something, but to some degree, when you start saying you're going to inflate the DoD budget to the biggest it has ever been in U.S. history, $813 billion, right? That's when Trump took us up to about 749-ish upon leaving office. Look, oh my gosh, the left was aghast. We couldn't believe he was, this GOP hawk, this Republican. How dare he throw so much more money at this inflated, bloated DoD budget? And here we are, almost $50 billion higher than where President Trump, when he left office. And all that money, I look around in places here like California, where the prices for everything are incredibly high. We're talking gas prices at an all-time high. We're talking food prices also at an all-time high. You can't get a cheeseburger here, even at McDonald's, for less than $6 out here. I don't know how the president could expand the DoD budget and line the pockets of his friends at Boeing, at Raytheon, at all these other defense contractors. Meanwhile, everyday Americans are having a hard time keeping gas in the tank and food on the table. And literally tent cities everywhere across my hometown. You can't go to even the suburbs to get away from these tent cities. And these are Americans. These are our neighbors, somebody's brothers, sisters, uncles. This is our people. We are not taking care of our own people. Instead, we're calling this quote unquote aid that we are sending to Ukraine. Meanwhile, that $16-17 billion that we're sending to Ukraine, in one fell swoop, and under that budget amount, you could literally wipe out homelessness in one fell swoop across this country. And instead, President Biden is choosing to expand the DoD budget, line his friends' pockets, and let millions of Americans, scores of Americans across this country teetering on the edge, or those already on it, suffer in silence. And nobody is talking about that. Instead, everybody's waving their yellow and gold flag. Oh, I'm doing something good by being a social media activist. But what are you really doing? What are you really doing? What you're actually doing is supporting the DoD and lining the pockets of these war hawks across this country and telling them it's okay to spend our hard-earned tax dollars on a country that has no actual bearing on the national security of this country. So let me just complain about that, because I'm feeling the prices here. I never thought I'd say I'd go back to D.C. and say, oh, I can save some money. But that's actually what's happening. It's a pretty bad place to be at when you're like, oh, D.C. is cheaper than L.A. It's incredible what you see out here and you look on the news and you see where our money is being spent. It is incredible when you see the human suffering firsthand.
And it's interesting because they came out days ago, a report talking about the number of homeless people in the state of California alone. And one of the shows that I watch on the weekends, it's called Beauty and the Boomer. They're up in Washington State around Seattle, but they were talking about how there's approximately about 160,000 homeless people in Washington State alone. And one of the girls on there, Chanda, she was saying how she was actually one of those volunteers that went out and tried to find these homeless people and find out how long they've been homeless, and doing these volunteer, kind of homeless walks and talking to these people and figuring out, the statistics. And that California, which is a state obviously much bigger than Washington State, they're estimating around 250,000 people that are homeless. And if you think about how many people, that's like basically Scottsdale, Arizona, a Reno, Nevada, a Buffalo, New York, a Fort Wayne, Indiana, that's around that size of people. Toledo, Ohio, an entire city homeless. And you have now, Manila, coming out of Los Angeles, and I'm sure you've probably heard this because it's kind of raising some contention with some, mainly with Republicans. You also had Andrew Yang talking about this universal basic income. Well, Los Angeles is going to test it out. Los Angeles, they say, is going to pay 1,000 residents picked at random to receive $36,000 over the next 3 years in a new trial program, and that households need to earn less than $96,000 and not receive any government handouts. Dozens of residents lined up in South LA to apply for this Breathe LA County's Guaranteed Income Program. It's going to, again, $1,000 a month to 1,000 Los Angeles residents. Any word on this and how people in LA are taking it? Because you have Orange County there that I know back in the day, it was always Orange County and then DuPage County, where I grew up, that were like the two most red counties in the country back in like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. They're saying they're seeing shifts go back that way again to what it was in the early 2000s. Any word on this and how people are feeling about it?
Orange County, Sharon, is actually where I'm staying with family.
Hey, girl.
Yeah, I had to drive through all of LA County. And let me tell you, it was like you entered the Twilight Zone or something when you, or at least you're exiting the Twilight Zone when you're leaving the LA County line, because it's literally one side of the line. You see graffiti and tent cities everywhere, and just a lot of stuff you see in movies, right? And it's like you cross over the county line into Orange County, and suddenly it's sunny and bright, and there's hardly any junk or graffiti on the walls. The freeways are clean. There's no potholes. I'm not saying it's a utopia, but you can clearly see the delineation between a far left government, newly installed, left-leaning government on the left side, people like George Gascon, the DA over there, and then out here where the sheriffs are cracking down. They're not having any of that stuff, right? So out here, in the last couple of weeks, you're not hearing any talk about the UBI or whatever. In California, in Los Angeles, they were talking about doing that UBI for the last couple of years, I would say, because they were modeling this after, as you mentioned, a couple of other cities, more in the Northwest corridor, cities in Oregon, cities in Washington State on a much smaller scale. Angelenos, for obvious reasons, they're going to line up for this lottery. But the bar being set at over $90,000 when the median household income across this country for a family of four is hovering at about $50,000 or $60,000, that is insane. That you're going to, what if somebody, 1, 2, 20 people in Los Angeles who earn $85,000, $90,000 a year, if they qualify? Are you kidding me? You're not starving. You're making $90,000 a year. You're not starving. So that's number one, is a little bit ridiculous. But number two, I have seen some limited data so far in the short period of time that we have talked about UBI, at least on a mass scale in this country. UBI has actually changed the lives of a lot of people. But these aren't people making $90,000, Sharon. These are people making on the verge, right, that are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 at the most. Now, other cities in the Northwest corridor are earning. So this $90,000 range, I find a little odd that they would make the bar so high.
I wonder if it's just because it's in California and it's so expensive to live in California. Is that what it is? The real estate and everything else. You made the point about the gas, food, all of those things just seem to be monstrously expensive in comparison to somewhere like Virginia, or even DC. So is it just the $90,000 doesn't go as far in California as opposed to, let's say, being on the East Coast?
Yes and no. I see the point of that. The cost of living out here is so much higher. But I also think the politicians in charge of Los Angeles in particular are so out of touch because they're going to their fancy restaurants all through the pandemic. They think it's normal to pay $40 salad think it's normal to go buy a $200 sweatshirt or a $75 T-shirt. They think that's normal. So I think a lot of the bar is set because they're out of touch with their constituency, because most Angelenos are not earning, they're not very far off from what people across the country as a median household income are earning. People are hustling hard out here, 50, 60 grand for a family of four. That is actually the normal median out here as well. So for them to set the bar so high, I think that just kind of lends itself to showing you how out of touch the politicians are in Los Angeles, because these are the same people that are telling everyone, oh, the gas prices are high, so you should just go buy a new Tesla.
Yeah, which I meant to say this. I don't know if I ever said this on the show before, that AOC and I live in the same building.
I think you have.
I think I have, yeah. And either way, I saw it last week when Jamarl dropped me off after work and rolls out in a new Tesla. AOC. That's where our, oh yeah, I remember saying this. I remember yelling about this because I was like, that's where our tax money's going. But Manila, when we're talking homeless, we're talking prices, especially in LA. I want to touch base because you never got a chance to put it out there and you were working so hard on it because Manila's office was like right next door to mine. Yeah. Talking about mental institutions in the United States and how one by one they were closing down and how much of these homeless people come from these institutions, because a lot of these, it's not just, homeless families, even though we're seeing more and more and more of that. But a lot of it, though, has to do with what's happening to mental institutions across the country. Please tell us what would have been your report.
Oh, gosh. Excuse me. Yeah, you're right. I was working on a special about the mass closures of mental institutions and how that relates to homelessness across this country. Now, I know what people are thinking, like, oh, you hear the term mental institution, you're thinking padded rooms and green walls and, the movie Girl Interrupted that really made Angelina Jolie the breakthrough actress that kind of took over Winona Ryder's would-be comeback. Well, yes, America does have a dark, ugly history with mental institutions, but that was just the prevailing orthodoxy at the time, because neurosciences weren't where they were at. Today, obviously, there are leaps and jumps that the medical industry on the psychiatric side have really gone through in the last 50 years over the end of the 20th century. So with the mass closures and the defunding of all of those state-run institutions that would otherwise be homes to a lot of these homeless people that you are seeing that are severely schizophrenic, severely paranoid. We're not talking people that are on the streets because of lifestyle choices. Yes, a lot of people are, and drug dependency is a mental disorder or disability to some degree, but those are lifestyle choices. We're talking about people who are, some that are criminally insane, people that are schizophrenic, the people that you hear, talking to themselves kind of in their own world. And by the way, we should destigmatize that you see somebody talking to themselves. They're not likely to actually harm you. They're in their own world. They are talking to whatever voices they're hearing. They're not the ones to worry about that homeless lady, that homeless guy is going to rob you. No, they're busy talking to the voices that they're hearing. They're not going to harm you. It's the one with the shifty eyes that's quiet and watching you get out of your car. Those are the people you watch for, and it's not usually the homeless people. It's usually, some punk on the street. But anyway, I digress. The whole evolution of closing, at one point, America had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of beds within either mental institutions or institutional wards of hospitals. Today, we are talking about some 30,000 beds across the entire country. Okay, we went from the early, 1950s or so, we're talking about 2 million beds or so across this country. And today, in the span of one boomer's lifetime, you're looking at 30,000 across this country. What happens to the people that are committing crimes and they have no place to go? This thing goes down the chain. It's not just mentally ill people that, need to be locked away for their own safety or for the safety of others. We're talking about people that are having mental breaks that are also going to be mistreated when you throw them in the wrong place. You make them incarcerated when they're mentally ill. They actually become victims of crimes themselves when they're in prison. The police, some of the bad apples or the police that are underfunded and not meant to take care of the mentally ill, they're at their wit's end of how to take care of these people. So, that you find police brutality there, and then they get thrown behind bars, and then you find them being abused by other inmates. You find other crimes being tacked onto them by judges because that's the only way to keep these people behind bars and off the streets. So all the way down the chain, when you look at somebody that's mentally ill in America today versus somebody that was mentally ill in the 1960s, not everybody's getting a lobotomy like Kennedy sister, the secret Kennedy sister, right? Although that was a thing back then. But what we're doing today is basically criminalizing mental illness because there's no place to take them. The state of Virginia, where I actually reside, Ralph Northam, on his way out, Ralph Northam, the Democrat governor who's supposed to care about, social issues and all this left and whatever stuff that he was running on a few years back. We had 5 mental institutions, state-run, across the state of Virginia when he entered office. He quietly, during the last part of 2021, there was 8 of them. He closed 5. There were 8 across the state. He closed 5. There were only 3 left across the state of Virginia. So a police officer arresting somebody committing a crime that has a mental illness, maybe having a mental break in, let's say, Fairfax, which is Fairfax County, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, they're going to have to spend at least 3 hours in each direction with 2 police officers to escort the mentally ill person to the nearest facility, which is over 3 hours away, way out in the countryside of Virginia. So you're taking now 2 cops off the street just to transport one person who shouldn't be behind bars because of their mental illness.
I mean, it's worse than that.
How much money?
Yeah, that's worse than that. I mean, just the fact that those facilities aren't there in general. Where do you put those people?
Was there a reason as to why the governor shut them down?
Plain and simple. Defunding and reallocating where that money goes.
And so where was it allocated to? Do they have those records?
No, I haven't gotten as far as the FOIA request for all of that yet. But I have a feeling it's to a lot of these programs in schools that are, I think, a lot of parents found questionable. Some of it was going to PPE, and there are some worthy causes. I get that a lot of schools are run down in the state and they need to fix ventilation, especially during the COVID era.
Yeah, but you shouldn't take it from a vital resource or a vital need in order to do it. I mean, because otherwise you create another problem. Where do those people go? And to your point,
exactly,
jail. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you have cops doing a job that cops shouldn't be doing. I mean, those homes should have been open. Manila, that's a great report. I really wish you could have had given that report. There's one
so close.
So close.
Yeah, so close. There's one other thing I want to get to. And I guess there are 2 stories. This just came out. Ivanka Trump, the daughter of senior White House advisor, former President Donald Trump, is set to testify before the January 6th committee on Tuesday, 3 sources tell NBC. It is not immediately clear whether Ivanka Trump is expected testimony would happen in person or virtually. And so we will see what goes on with that one. There's another story out with Cuomo. Governor Andrew Cuomo, going from one governor to another, sued New York Ethics Commission on Friday, contending that its effort to force him to turn over the proceeds of the $5.1 million book deal were a violation of his constitutional rights. Now, keep in mind, remember what happened. Andrew Cuomo is killing grandmas with his policies on COVID. And while he's killing these grandmas, he's going out to the public and acting as if I am the adult in the room, while behind the scenes dropping the numbers, meaning hiding the number of people that were basically dying under his watch. Well, as he was doing this, he got an Emmy for this. He wrote a book talking about how I'm the adult in the room on this.
And PSA, Italians, we do not hug and kiss you on the mouth. Okay? That's what his thing. I do it because I'm Italian. That's what we do. We hug each other and we try to make out with you. PSA, half Italian, we do not do that.
He couldn't keep his hands to himself. That's the other one.
Yes.
He kept groping women, party situations and all this other stuff. And so their thing is like, dude, you got all of these people killed with COVID and you were lying about it. And on top of lying about it, you acted as if you were successful. Well, you wrote a book on the premise that you were successful. You were not. Not to mention using government resources in order to do that book. What are your thoughts on this?
Potentially running again.
Yeah. And there's that part, trying to get back into politics. Amazing.
That's the whole reason. That's the whole reason that Cuomo had stepped down versus being forced out amid that ethics investigation. Because if he were to have been forced out, it would have barred him from running again. At least those are the rules in New York State. So first, let me say gross. And maybe it's a little too soon, and maybe I'm going to sound harsh, but it was bad enough that we were burying grandma, but now we find out you're burying the numbers too. So more people should be outraged over those local state politics there, and that guy should be completely barred from doing any sort of public job whatsoever. And his Grammy or Emmy that he won?
Yeah, he got an Emmy.
Totally.
Yeah. And shout out to Holly in the chat who said, hey, remember, he's probably going to run again. But remember in the very beginning of COVID, every day, we don't know what COVID's going to happen. We're going to bring in the hospitals. We got the PPEs every day. Even my sister was in New York at the time. And she was like, every day I turned it on to see what was happening. And he was very transparent like that. But remember, with Trump, this is America's president. This is the true American president. And they were so quick to put him up on this pedestal. And then all the emperor's clothes came off.
Okay. Say this. First of all, the Screen Actors Guild was literally considering taking Will Smith's newly won Oscar away from him for the slap heard around the world. Yet we find out Andrew Cuomo led to the deaths of thousands of old people in New York State, and he's still shining and polishing his freaking Emmy over there, planning his comeback. So, hello, Awards Guild people, get off your high horse and figure out what to do about that and rescind that award because it was ill-gotten gold. And secondly, just this guy, with no political backlash against him, the investigation went supposedly nowhere. We know what they found. They're just burying the information and refusing to press charges against this guy. This guy is a sexual predator. You want to put him in the Capitol office in Albany? Like, get out of here, guys. People, this again shows you the political elite class and how out of touch they are with reality and the important things. These are somebody's daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Had his hand up their shirt. What if that was your sister? What if that was your aunt?
Manila, we're going to have to cut in. But look, agreed.
And we cannot forget Brother Fredo.
Fredo.
Chris helping him out on that media drive. Hey, buddy, hey, don't worry about it. Hey, you come on, I'll do a Q-tip up your nose and we'll have some, come on, we'll have some dinner, have some laughs, and then don't forget to call Mom. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Manila, thank you very much.
Love you, Manila.
Is a veteran news anchor and former host of RT's America Daily news program, In Question, one of my favorite shows. I want to thank all of our engineers, producers. I want to thank my co-host, Farron Franzak. My name is Jamal Thomas. You guys have a phenomenally awesome, great day. I'll see you in the morning.
Thanks so much, guys. And as always, may the good news be yours.
Fault Lines.